Welcome to the round one episode of Rippin' In. The footy is finally back, and we are going in depth on every team list and matchup for the first 8 games of the season. We said we were going to spend about 10 minutes per game. We ended up spending probably over 20 per matchup. So I'm definitely going to make sure that we list out each time for each game for you guys so you can skip to the content that you want to hear or just listen all the way through. We had a lot of fun in this episode, so enjoy. Let's fucking rip in. All right. We're fucking here. It's here, Spencer. It's finally fucking here. The NRL's back.
Why are we all excited? I don't care. I'm a Broncos fan. Call me in 12 weeks and fuck off.
Well, I wouldn't be very excited, particularly after seeing that first team list, hey, mate.
Shut your mouth. How about that? How about we just get cracking into fucking Thursday night footy? Talk about Friday night footy later on. I don't want to fucking hear it.
That's it. We've got plenty of shit to get through today. There are 8 matchups ranging from very fucking exciting to I'll probably fall asleep watching it. Now, one thing before we get into this week's round previews, I did want to ask your opinion on probably the biggest news story from this week. It was a bit of a slower week for NRL news stories, but this one, I think, it was pretty much Cooper Cronk versus Buzz Rothfield. As far as Cooper Cronk was found out to be both a coach at the Roosters and also a partial coach, according to Cooper Cronk, at the Storm. So there was a social media post that showed him actively coaching the halves of the Melbourne Storm on field. And even though Buzz Rothfield did a little bit of investigating, talking to his manager and both clubs and sort of thing, he didn't really get a clear answer on what the division of roles was. So he released his story that he thought that was a conflict of interest. And then sparks were flying on NRL 360, wherein, honestly, Cooper Cronk got really, really defensive. I thought he lost a little bit of the upper hand in that interview because he was... While he is a cool, calm, and collected man, you could see the anger bubbling beneath the surface, and so I think he made a bit of an error there in terms of the way he handled it. And at the end of it all, he made it out as if it was all hunky-dory. There's a very clear division, even though he's a coach of both the Roosters, and he actively helps them in their game strategy, and while also being a coach of the halves at the Storm. He did not see that as a conflict of interest. I 100% do. But before I give my opinion on that, what do you think? Is that a conflict of interest? Can you do both?
I'll start this the way that I'll start any story or any chat that we do about Buzz Rothfield, and he's a fuckhead. His only job is to just try to piss people off, and I've watched a lot of NRL 360 and will continue to do so. But all his tactic is just going, no. Repeat the same thing that I said 5 minutes ago that's already been answered. No. Say it again. I don't know if it's because he's senile. I don't know if it's because he likes the sound of his own voice. I wouldn't think it is, because he sounds like shit. But I don't see any problem with what Cooper Cronk is doing at all. I watched that interview last night. I looked into it afterwards, and he said first of all, he said that the fuck up was the Melbourne Storm social media team. They shouldn't have posted that photo. They were told they weren't instructed fully on what to do with it, and they posted that wrongfully, and that's been dealt with internally by the Melbourne Storm. From what I've read and I've watched from Cooper Cronk, is he's saying that from the Storm perspective, he is very much in the corporate side of things. So he has absolutely nothing to do with their game plan. He has absolutely nothing to do with their coaching outside of, to his word, again, on NRL 360, not too sure, can't confirm or deny any sort of facts. But he said that he's had about 10 interactions over Zoom with the halves, and he's had 2 face-to-face interactions with Jerome Hughes and Cameron Munster. On the flip side of that, at the Roosters, so the way this seems so that buzz was going on about him is he said that the Melbourne Storm had him on their player or coaching salary cap rather than their corporate, whereas the Roosters definitely have him on the coaching salary. But he said that he has no influence in game plans or game prep with the Storm, but he does with the Roosters. So now what we're coming down to is that if that's what he says, and that he's doing what he's doing for the Roosters, which is game plan, prep, trying to figure out things for them, and then he's just helping out the halves at the Melbourne Storm, the only people that should have any problems with this is either the Roosters, if they think that Cooper Cronk's going to run over to Melbourne land and give them all of their tips, or on the flip side, that Melbourne are worried that he's going to go over to Melbourne and go back to East Sydney and tell them everything. I think that the recent success of both of those clubs would suggest that, like, they're okay with that, and they're pretty confident that isn't going to happen. So I really don't see any problem with this happening, because the same thing is almost happening with, like, that doesn't have anybody talking about, with Gordon Tallis. Gordon Tallis, like is an ambassador for the Titans, was pretty influential in them signing David Fifita among the monster contract they gave him. But he said, if you come down to the Gold Coast, I'll train you, I'll help you become the best player that you can be. And now Kevy has him helping out with the training sessions at the Broncos. You just can do both. It just comes down to both of those clubs trusting the player. And at the end of the day, like, it's really just rugby league, right? Like, when you watch a Roosters game, it's not like you're waiting to see, like, oh, like, it's not like the NFL where they're like, oh, what player are they going to employ for them to get James Tedesco open? No, you know that once they get the forwards rolling and you're backpedaling on defense and they have that massive sweeping backline that goes from fucking right to left and James Tedesco gets the ball at full pelt, no game plan in the world is going to help you tackle that slippery fuck any more than, like, it's, you know what I mean? Like, I just think, like I said, it was a slow news week. Buzz Rothfield has to just do whatever he can to try to stay relevant because he knows he's about to cark it soon. And while I think I didn't see Cooper Cronk getting defensive, I just saw him getting pissed off with Buzz Rothfield, because that's what he does on these panels. Like, he doesn't actually listen to you. He doesn't care about what you have to say. He just wants you to know that you've heard what he said, and then gets you to repeat what you said just over and over again until he sees you crack. And then he'll go, "Oh mate, look, don't get angry at me. Look, I'm just trying to ask you a question. A question you asked me 5 fucking times already, you old fuck. Fuck him."
Yeah, look, and you're right that if both the Roosters and the Storm have no problem with the current setup, then maybe there isn't a case to be answered here. And if you don't like Buzz, then you probably also don't really like Paul Kent. But he did raise a good point, which is that even if you're on the coaching staff at the Roosters with game strategy and trying to help them win a premiership, but you're just a halves coach at the Storm, there could be some unconscious things going on there. You may not realize that you're actually giving information that you learned from one place to another. You know what I mean? Like, if you grow as a coach or as some kind of mentor through something that you learned with the Roosters, like, this is the way we do things, you should apply this mindset, whatever. So there could be any number of, like, things that you learn, and then unconsciously you apply that to your teachings, and then you've taken those teachings and you've given it to the Storm. So I think there could be some
but that could happen both ways.
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying, like, even though they're both okay with it, I'm wondering if it's like, just maybe affecting the results of what should otherwise be a fair and even competition. So that's the unconscious side of things. There was also, a couple of things I was like, which number one was the fact that he's on the coaching salary at the Storm. Like, he can say, oh, that's for the Storm to sort out, but, like, they don't really get that wrong. They don't really, or at least, like, if the NRL is, like, trying to keep its nose clean and keep things in order, like, how can they allow for, oh yeah, you have a coaching budget and you have a corporate budget and you have a whatever, and then the Storm have got Cooper on that budget. Like, it doesn't seem like an accident to me. It seems like he's a coach. But then, yeah, also there could be potential for nefariousness there, like, just shouldn't be left up to people's ethics. Like, I don't want to call into question anybody's ethics or integrity here, but is it not that we just want to, with anything, whether it's the law in general society or the rules and regulations of rugby league, don't we just want to have the most unquestionably fair and honest game possible? And that is, we don't even want to leave it up to someone's potential integrity that they can be a coach at one place and also be a coach at another. You should not be able to, I think, be an active participant in one club's title hopes and then also helping 2 players or however many players at another club that really are the most pivotal positions in that club's run at a premiership. Like, you've got hands in 2 cookie jars. You have one. You get one.
No, like I don't think so. Because like you look at when Craig Bellamy coached New South Wales when they were going up against the Melbourne Big Three, and they had Queensland had fucking Folau, Inglis, Slater, Cameron Smith, Cooper Cronk. No one in New South Wales media was going like, oh well, Craig Bellamy shouldn't be coached because, like, what if, like, things that he teaches the New South Wales players, like, is consciously in reverse effect to how, like, Queensland might want to play? Like, what if he knows the game plan or the strategy of what Cooper Cronk and Cameron Smith are going to do? Like, that's unfair. To me, that's just footy. Like, I can understand, like, the at the same time thing maybe, but, like, at least from Cooper Cronk's mouth, he said that his own, like, when it comes to Jerome Hughes and Cameron Munster, it's purely about, like, once you grab the footy, it's like, this is what I look for when I do this. This is where you should be passing to. Like, these are the type of things, like, to get them better as a footy player, as a halfback. Whereas at the Roosters, it's very much about, like, okay, this week we are versing the Manly Sea Eagles. The Manly Sea Eagles are really bad at protecting themselves under the high ball, particularly with Tommy Turbo. I think that we need to really pressure them with bombs early on. So, because I understand where you're coming from, and that's such fucking Paul Kent to make like such an abstract, like very well thought out, articulate answer about something that might only be an impact maybe 1% of the time, but it makes you think nonetheless. Because then you've got to start taking everything in, because it's like, well, if that's the case, then, like, is it fair that Craig Bellamy went to go coach the Melbourne Storm after being in the Broncos all that time? Because since then, the Melbourne Storm have had the Broncos number pretty well. So you could maybe make some inferences that maybe Craig Bellamy knows the Broncos system inside and out. You know, was it fair that fucking, like, Craig Bellamy played at the Raiders when Ricky Stewart was there? So he might know Ricky Stewart's game plan and his tactics when they, like, it can get so overblown and, like, so crazy. And I think, like, when it comes to the Storm and the Roosters and Cooper Cronk, I think that, like, they should all just be allowed to do what they want. And unless, like, if it was and I think that's what was the issue, is that the Roosters, the Storm social media team just came out and posted something that, like, shouldn't have been posted. Because if that didn't get posted, it wouldn't have been, like, as big of a thing, because then it would have come out and been like, oh, hey Cooper, like, how's it going, mate? Like, you know, we've just heard rumors, like, you've been practicing with, like, Cameron Munster and, like, Jerome Hughes. Oh yeah, mate, actually, thanks for asking. Like, yeah, like, so I'm just down there to just sort of help those two guys out as halves, because, like, you know, I want to repay the Melbourne Storm. What he's doing at the end of the day, like, he does have his hand into 2 cookie jars, but it's like he's learning from arguably 4, and he makes mention of this, 4 of the greatest minds in footy in Trent Robinson and what's the GM or the president's name, GM? Panossi? Politis. Yeah, sorry. And it's Frank Panossi is the Storm CEO, and then Craig Bellamy. And either of those 2 teams, if he can get himself a coaching gig at either of those 2, that's going to be, like, very, very, like, crucial and influential for his coaching career moving forward. But yeah, and particularly as well, like, if this was the NFL or, like, to a certain degree, like the NBA, where, like, plays and structures, like, actually matter, where, like, if Cooper Cronk could go to the Melbourne Storm and go, oh, hey guys, on 3rd down, they're going to run this exact play. So if you run this exact defense, you're going to be able to stop it. At its purest form, rugby league is just, you've got 5 tackles to prove that you're better than us, and we've got 5 tackles to stop you from proving that. What Cooper Cronk said, and like Kenny said, like, oh, you could subconsciously give them some info. But in my thing, like, it's happening both ways, so just both teams are getting better. So at the end of the day, who gives a shit? Like,
yeah, it was just all handled really poorly, I think, not just from the social media team of the Storm, but then also I think it was fair enough what Buzz said about the manager for Cooper Cronk, that he didn't fess up to the relationship. So it was kind of like a few dominoes all stacked up to tumble down together, and that the Storm posted something that the manager then wouldn't confirm that he actually did have a coaching position there at the Storm. He's like, no, it's completely corporate, not at all. And then Cooper Cronk's like, oh no, it actually is a little bit coaching. And then, you know, it all kept, like, snowballing from there. So I think it was probably handled a little bit better from the outset. It wouldn't have ever been an issue. But yeah, it certainly got me thinking anyway. Like, if I had my ideal rugby league world, I don't think I would allow, you know, that kind of crossover. Because I think there is a difference between, like, someone who is actively involved in game strategy and pivotal positions like halves, and then something like a wrestling coach or a trainer or something like that. You know, like, let's say someone who's a yoga trainer to get them all flexible. Like, yeah, fuck yeah, you can work with all 16 teams if you're the best at being someone who's good with flexibility. But if you're a specialist game strategist, you cannot work with both. And I think there was just some elements in my mind that like you're bringing the same strategy and the same mindset into two places, which is affecting rugby league's integrity as a whole. But, that's neither here nor there. We don't want to spend too much time on this one because we've got plenty of shit to get through today. So, yeah, let's get into it. The very first game we've got, of course, is easily the game of the round. It's the battle of the heavyweights, and more importantly, it's the battle of the two teams that we've nominated as our premier, well, not our premiership favourites, but at least the teams that we think will finish at the top of the ladder at the end of the regular season. So we've got the Melbourne Storm taking on the South Sydney Rabbitohs. Have you had a look at their team list? What do you reckon, mate?
I have indeed had a look at the team list, actually. Look at me, all prepared and shit. Look, I'll just get straight onto the Rabbitohs because, I've no illusion that these guys they're my picks. I think they're going to finish the season as premiers. And I think straight away the reason for that is just depth in the forward pack. So when I looked at their team list and I saw Jai Arrow number 17, I thought, who's in the starting lineup for him? You go through that 8 to 13, and it's Tom Burgess, Damien Cook, Tavita Totola, Jacob Host, Jaden Sewer, and Cameron Murray. So once you've dealt with all those big boppers, you've then got Jai Arrow coming onto the field. You've also got Mark Nichols, who has proven to be pretty effective, like a little bit of a plotter, as we like to say around these parts. And then, I'm going to butcher this one, Kaloa Matangi, big unit, averaged 110 metres a game as a 22-year-old prop. Very bright future. Wayne Bennett seems has his way with those young forwards. That's going to look really good. And then, of course, we can't look past Benji Marshall either. He's going to be their little masterstroke. I think whether he comes on in half, whether he comes on as that roaming number 13, remains to be seen. But looking at their forward pack, I think it's just far better than it was last year. I think they match up very evenly with the Melbourne Storm. But then going to their back line, I've already said it. Trell's going to be Dally M Player of the Year. AJ and Josh Mansour, arguably two of the best wingers in the game, both for different reasons. AJ loves to score a try. Josh Mansour pretty much has the yardage of a forward. Dane Gagai, Gunn, Campbell Graham, look, not the greatest, but when you're running outside of Seawalks and Latrell, you're going to get a lot of 2-on-1s. I think in the trial game last weekend, Latrell's little run up the line to then dummy while falling over to then pop the ball back into the inside to Quady Walker was just absolutely fantastic. They're building an awesome little partnership. Not to look past the Melbourne Storm, but I just think the loss of Harry Grant in week 1 is going to be one thing they're going to have to deal with, just a player of his quality. No Cameron Smith is an even bigger thing to have to overcome. Nico Hines coming off at number 17, whether he plays, whether he's late scratch, I'm not sure. I don't think he's going to be as big of an impact as Benji Marshall. But with saying that, I feel like I have been riding the Rabbitohs maybe a little bit too hard in this preseason. I know that you've been pretty critical of Benji Marshall and whether or not he's going to fit into that system, Alex. So what do you think about this game, Thursday Night Footy, first one of the season?
Well, I hate to think I'm being too critical. I just like to sort of point out some areas where I just wonder about the strategies, and in that preseason episode, I did mention that I thought that Benji Marshall was a great signing for the South Sydney Rabbitohs, but as a depth signing. And so, I had made the assertion that he would maybe going to play 6, 7 or 9. And it is starting to come out a little bit more that it's going to be the number 13 spot, which still to me isn't the right move because of the way that the number 13 position has been going for the last few years, in that they're supposed to be like these uber mobile dudes that make a shit ton of tackles, like kind of act as if they're... I guess they're both a 5'8", but also like maybe a fullback or a center, and that they can be like hitting a nice hole for you, or maybe even like the creator of that situation where they're given the offloads. And when you use a guy like Benji Marshall, all you're really doing is creating a third half, which I guess does have its strategic advantages. So, look, we'll get to see it this weekend and in a blockbuster game to boot. Outside of that, we just got the confirmation that, nobody really expected otherwise, but that Josh Mansour is, of course, going to take his position on the wing in place of the incumbent Jackson Paulo. Jackson Paulo went okay in 2020, but I always did see him dropping out of this side. Poor bugger. then as well, I have a different opinion on the Jai Arrow thing. Like, the way that you framed it from the outset of this episode was that, oh, this is a masterstroke, imagine bringing Jai Arrow off the bench. Like, for me, this is only further cementing what it is I had to say about Jai Arrow, and that if this is one of the premier second rowers of the game, why can't he beat Jacob Host to a starting spot? Like, Jacob Host isn't very good. Like, so is it a tactic by Wayne Bennett, or is it the same as what it was at the Titans? Because this is what they were doing with Jai Arrow at the Titans, and it certainly wasn't a tactic. It was that other people had stepped up their games in Jai Arrow's absence, and he couldn't even force his way into the starting side. Like, he's become a second-tier second rower. That's why he's on the bench.
Would you say that Angus Crichton is pretty good? Pretty good second rower?
Yes, and he started.
Hey, he started last season off the bench, though. I reckon Jacob Host is, like, he's on dirt cheap money. He pretty much is just I think his stats for last season was 180 tackles off of something 60 metres a game. Not wowing you with anything. But as we start to sort of make this transition between, you got your edges and you got your middle forwards, and also, like, what we spoke about earlier on in this podcast is the battle of the stints. So, 4 20-minute stints, you got to win the first, got to win second, third, fourth, yada, yada. Jai Arrow coming in on that second forward rotation, I think is going to be really fucking critical. And more to the point, I think that's Wayne Bennett sort of looking at it as like, okay, how are we going to beat certain teams? So I think there will be some games and there will be some weeks where Jai Arrow starts. But I think in a game like it is against Melbourne Storm, if there's Rabbitohs can sort of hold the Storm and keep their forward pack in check for that first 20 minutes, I think the value of Jai Arrow coming off the bench after 20 or 25 minutes is just going to be even heightened. And also as well now, like, if Jason Taumolo played his best footy coming off the bench, and when he came on, he would just absolutely run through teams. I don't see the issue in citing your best players off the bench. Like, for a long time now, like, I've always thought that Tavita Pangai Jr. has always played his better footy coming off the bench, because for whatever reason, maybe it is he doesn't like the contacts early on, but he's always just been the guy when those games that he has to come off the bench, he gets rolling, he gets stuck into a little bit more. And I think that maybe with Jai Arrow, that's what Wayne Bennett is hoping to do. And also, like, you look at that back row, and yeah, Jacob Host, so-so, but Jaden Saw is an 80-minute assassin. Just anything his shoulder he can get to sniff at, he's cracking. And Cameron Money Murray, there you go. He is that new age of lock that everybody's trying to find. Like, him and Victor Radley are those guys where it is hard to sort of say what sort of position they play when they're attacking the ball. And I like the term false ball player, because I think what they do more than anything, it isn't necessarily how good their ball playing is. It's just the fear and the change in the defensive structure that has to happen when they do get the ball, because it isn't a guy that's either going to give off a really, either a run or a run on an offload. These guys can genuinely set a play up, not to the level of a half by any stretch of imagination, but they can hold their own doing that. And I think with the way this team is set up, with then Jai Arrow coming on the bench, I think that's going to be really fucking huge. And to me, should be a pretty vital change in the game, where if the Rabbitohs are losing in that first 20 minutes, I see Jai Arrow coming on and like being brought on to try to change the game. Otherwise, I think if the Storm can't win that early stint, looking at their bench, I don't know how they're going to be able to sort of take that arm wrestle back, particularly when you've got Asafa Solomona starting at 13 as compared to his normal position of prop, with the loss of Tino, of course.
Yeah, I guess I can't deny that we've definitely agreed on that there is a real tactic that can be used these days, where if you can sub off a tier 1 prop or forward of any kind and bring on someone of almost the same kind of quality, or perhaps even, to an extent, putting your best forward on the bench to bring them on in a critical period of the game. The Raiders even employ that strategy with Joe Tarpany for a lot of last season. I cannot deny you that as a tactic. My only thing is that I don't think that Jai Arrow is that kind of impact player. I think Jai Arrow is more akin to a Jake Trbojevic, that you need him on the field for 70 or 80 minutes. Like, his best football is effort football, is like a lot of tackles, a lot of runs, probably not going to be like bending the line and smashing people, but like just keeps going. So I don't see him as an impact player, and that's why when I see him on the bench, I'm like, is this really just an indictment that was my argument of Jairo, and that I don't actually think he's a top tier second rower anymore. But remains to be seen. The best litmus test is, of course, going to be this game and then the next, let's say, 5 to 6 weeks if he does come off the bench.
And I think it is something that's interesting though. Like you say, like, you know, the effort play, like, you know, more tackles, more meters, more runs, more involvement, let's say. But I think that's a little bit slighted from the fact that the Titans team that he came from, particularly that forward pack, it was almost a necessity that he had to do that every single week. And a lot of those guys, like, you know, we even look at Jason Taumolo. He's been, you know, the chat is that he's going to be playing less minutes to try to increase his, you know, his per minute output. With Jairo now, like, is it worth it? Like, have the Rabbitohs been looking into it and going, okay, like, rather than having a guy that we know can play 80 minutes, we know he can play 80 minutes and he can do it really well. If we just make him play 55 or 60, then theoretically, like, yeah, his total of runs might be down, his total of tackles might be down. But my thing is, especially with forwards and, like, coming from a Broncos perspective of having Haas pretty much play 80 minutes every single week, which I think is going to be detrimental to his career moving forward, is every time that you can save Jairo 25 to 30 minutes in game time because they're winning a game or they don't really need him, then when it gets to your round 18s, your round 19s, your round 20s, after Origin, you've got less miles and you've got less tread on more tread on those tires, so that when you are making that push to the finals, then maybe that's the time that you actually start employing Jairo for the full 80 minutes. Like the Roosters did that last year with Angus Crichton, where they started him off early in the season. Like, I don't think he was starting. It was Orbison and Boyd Cordner were the starting second rowers. And I think for maybe one or two of those games, he might have been 18th or 19th man and got brought in late. And then as the season wore on, he ended up finding his groove and finding his form, and easily was one of the top second rowers in the game. So I think that's going to be a very interesting little, like, and that's like talk about like this game. Let's not forget the two coaches who we talk about rugby league being very simple, very basic, but two of the most comprehensive minds of footy probably ever in Bellyache and Bennett. Going to be really awesome, and I love watching these coaching battles where who's going to blink first, who's going to make the first interchange, and what is that interchange going to be for? Like, when does Wayne Bennett roll the dice and put Benji Marshall on? When does Craig Bellamy think that it's time to bring Nico Hines on for that same sort of role? Like, I love that sort of shit in footy, more so than just, you know, 5 tackles, run as much as we can, see if we can get the try. Like, actually going like, okay, will teams take some time off in certain stints of the game to sort of like, you know, like right now we're just in weathering the storm mode. And then once we've got our guy back on, like if Cameron Murray comes off, maybe the Rabbitohs might lose a bit in attack. But then when he comes back on for the last 20 or so minutes, do they then start to sort of roll over? Like, I'm frothing that battle and just, looking at that particular lineup, the particular lineups that both these teams look to be employed.
Yeah, and we've discussed the Rabbits 17 so far and then compared it to the Storm, but we haven't actually addressed, you know, what their 17 selected is looking like. And the interesting ones are, now you did mention it, that Asafa Solomona is starting at number 13 in place of the injured Dale Finucane. Yeah, definitely not the typical 13 that we're now seeing at other clubs these days, and especially compared to the guy he's going to be marking up at in Cameron Murray. You know, you've probably never seen two more different players at the same position. Interestingly, with Asafa Solomona going at number 13, I don't really see him lasting more than 25 minutes before having a lengthy spell. So, yeah, that changes an entire team dynamic right there. And then the interesting selection that we bandied backwards and forwards during the Storm episode was, who's going to get that wing spot? Is it going to be your man Lumi? Is it going to be George Jennings? Is it going to be Remus Smith? And then we get both Jennings and Remus Smith because Branko Lee has been a late scratching for the Melbourne Storm. Looking at those selections, though, I read it as though Smith is probably going to be the preferred guy to start on that wing going forward because they trust him enough and think he's a caliber of player that can come in and play centre. So, you know, I'm thinking like when Branko comes back, they just move Remus out one. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Jennings is just a specialist winger and Remus Smith is going to be Mr. Fix-It. What do you reckon with both these guys being selected?
First of all, I'll be on the record of saying that Lumi was fucking robbed. Let's just get that thing straight. How's he going to win Rookie of the Year when he's not even playing? Bellyache.
That's why you named both Lumi and Charlie Staines.
Yeah, I still got trust in the Ferrari, I guess. So yeah, Lumi, robbed. Absolutely robbed. Whether or not I think Remus Smith or George Jennings will be there once Branko Lee comes back, I think George Jennings will probably stay. I'll do that just to go against you, just to argue for the sake of arguing. But also, I think now more so than anything, I think the wingers are more important, a more unique position than centre, because really for me, like a centre is just a winger who can't really score, or a second rower who can't really tackle, or a half who can't really pass. So they're kind of in that in-between phase of everybody. And this obviously depends on whether or not both of them or any of them have good games. I just think, that George Jennings, in the limited game time that he's had, has looked pretty good. And Craig Bellamy is a guy that normally likes to stick with like the lineups as much as he can. But it's a tough one, really, because where was Jennings going to be the winger before Brenko Lee got injured? Was Remus Smith? Like, you don't really know. But I will say that George Jennings will do well enough. 140, 150 metres, let's say. Won't score a meaty because the Fox will get the meaties. And I think just, going game over game, depending on how long Brenko Lee's out for. I know that he was a late scratch, but, as Tommy T knows, hamstrings can be pretty finicky. He only got through a limited training session on Monday, so we'll see. But I think Jennings over Smith for me.
All right, well, I'll ask you this question. This is the quintessential question that I think needs to be asked for every team in every game this round. What wins it for the South Sydney Rabbitohs? If they go on to win this game, how do they do it?
Rabbits will win that opening 25 minutes of the game. Dry Arrow will come onto the field, will shake a few things up. I think the speed of the play of the ball will hurt the Storm early, like you said, with Asafa Solomona in lock. David versus Goliath in terms of physical profiles, if you've ever seen it, between Cam Murray and Solomona. Obviously, Cam Murray's ripped like a brick shithouse, but he still probably is losing about half a foot in height to Solomona and probably a good 20 or so kegs.
Half a foot? Fuck, I reckon 2 foot.
2 foot? We'll go 2 foot. Play it even, go the overs. Oh, and it's so hard because the Melbourne Storm is still the Melbourne Storm, right? Like, even losing Cameron Smith, not having Harry Grant, their squad looks pretty solid. But overall, I think Cody Walker will have a blinder of a game. His speed around the ruck will be fantastic. I've always said that Cody Walker is probably the best footy player that I've seen when his team has the roll on, it has the front foot. That South Sydney pack is just very, very intimidating. And I think the Rabbitohs are closer to hard to say this, closer than a finished product than the Melbourne Storm. Obviously, the Melbourne Storm won the grand final last year, but no Cameron Smith. I think that is just such a big hurdle they're going to have to jump. And I just see the South Sydney Rabbitohs, at least from opening week, just being able to hit the ground running a little bit more. And as good as Ryan Pappenhausen is, and he is a great fullback, don't get me wrong, the form that Latrell's shown in the preseason trials has been frothy. And I think that they just end up... And I say running away with it, I don't think that they're going to blow the Storm out, but I think they'll win 22-12, and it'll be from that opening stint in the first half. And then the moment that Asafa Solomona comes off and Dry Arrow comes on for the Rabbitohs, I think that'll really change the game in the Rabbitohs' favour.
All right, and for me, because I've gone the Storm, I just think that, I'm hot on Craig Bellamy and the impact that he has on the Melbourne Storm. I think that many of the stars over the past 2 decades from the Melbourne Storm are as much, if not mostly, Craig Bellamy's work as they are the superstar talent that each player had. So even with this team, which undoubtedly is not as stacked as it has been in the past couple of years, notably lacking one C. Smith, but at the end of the day, Craig Bellamy always has a Storm team absolute game ready from round one. There's no other team that comes into every season as conditioned and battle-hardened as the Storm. So I think even with this new look team, they're going to be fucking ready. Whereas I think the Rabbitohs are the type of team that will take a couple of rounds to find their feet, a couple of new combinations, a couple of tactics that we've already discovered in this game, in a couple of tactics that we've already discussed in this podcast. So I think it'll take a couple of rounds to get out some kinks. And then once they do, they're going to fucking go on an absolute tear. So you know that I think that they're going to have an amazing season, but I think that when it comes to this round 1 matchup, it's going to be tweet. But the Storm will come out on top, maybe 4 points.
All I've heard is that after Thursday night footy, it's going to be 1-0 to Spencer in the tipping comp.
See you at the end of the season, bud.
Yeah, fuck off. Now, not that I don't enjoy my Thursday night footy, because I do. But Friday night footy, it just rolls off the tongue. All right? Friday night footy, 2 words in there that start with the letter F. Knights in there, so that's pretty good. And we've also got the Newcastle Knights starting off Friday night footy against the Bulldogs. Now, it's a 6 p.m. game, and normally the 6 p.m. game on a Friday, particularly with daylight savings times, most people in the southern states, from Queensland, of course, aren't even really home from work. Don't really have a chance to actually get to the game. So these games is normally just a bit of a warm-up, if you will. You know, I mean, 7:30 p.m., that's normally the prime time main event. So with this 6 p.m. game, with the 2 teams, Newcastle Knights and the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs, I'll throw it over to you, Alex. What are your thoughts?
What an exciting matchup, hey? Look, I actually didn't realise that the Knights are starting off their season pretty decimated by injury. Like, I was aware of Ponga, but then also looking at this team list when it came out, I was like, oh, okay, no Heimel Hunt, no Edric Lee. These are either Origin players or on the cusp of Origin. I believe Heimel Hunt was in the 20 or 30, right? Yeah, so 1 to 3 has already, gone, and then Blake Green, which sees Tex Hoy go to fullback, and then some bloke named Toa on a wing, and then Shibasaki, who I think, Shibasaki is actually all right. But what this does is it actually leaves their bench as a bunch of fucking no-namers. I look at this bench, I was like, who? That's not good. Looking at the total aggregate of the lists that were released today, the teams that I think are going to be actual premiership contenders, they all are even stacked on the bench. They're bringing on representative quality players off the bench, or at least anywhere else they'd be a starting player. But at this particular team, because they're so fucking good, they're on the bench. And then you look at the Knights and you're like, uh-oh. And then you got Kurt Mann, who plays at number 6 instead of Blake Green, who's out injured, and then Connor Watson at number 13. So that's yet another small number 13. This is going to be a real ongoing battle of strategy that I'm going to pay a lot of attention to across the season. What is the best tactic for a number 13? Is it still the 80-minute, plenty of tackles, pretty good offload kind of 13? Is it the power running, power hitting number 13? Or is it the little guy that kind of plays like a third half? There's honestly all 3 of those players across the 16 different teams. So this is Connor Watson at 13, tiny guy, pretty much a fullback / 5'8". Yes, he is, but little. So I don't know, man. I'm actually really, really concerned about this Knights team for this game.
Yeah, and I'll start with the Dogs, because looking at the Dogs back line compared to the Knights, I will say that in my preview for the Knights, I said that they'll make the 8. They'll, sort of just squeak in there, but I really want to see the next step from Kalen Ponga. Obviously, he's not there. And nothing against Newcastle Knights and Newcastle Knight fans, but they're paying Kalen Ponga a lot of money, and they pay him a lot of money because he draws fans to the stadium and people to watch the TV, and he's not there, so there's already a little bit of a sour spot there. So I'm going to look over to the Canterbury Bulldogs back line, and in all honesty, looking at it, it's not bad. It's not bad at all. Corey Allen, as we've said, starting fullback, has a really good passing game on him. Running game, still to be confirmed. Has been kind of shaky under the high ball, but that normally comes with a little bit more, a game experience and a little bit more time. Obviously, Nick Kotrick, Jack City, he's starting centre with Will Hopewade. A lot of attacking potential there. Dallin Watene-Zelezniak seems like he's been around in the league forever now. He's played fullback in the past. He's played centre. He's played wing, so he can play anywhere in the backs line. He's a serviceable member. Nick Meaney again played a little bit of fullback last year. He's pretty talented. Jake Avarillo again played a bit of wing, played a bit of centre. Is playing in 5'8". I'm not the biggest Dogs fan, nor do I claim to be. I'm interested to see where that goes. But I think the biggest one for me, the biggest X factor, if you will, is the guy that's going to have the biggest chip in his shoulder, and that's Kyle Flanagan. And I see a fantastic opportunity in this first game for Kyle Flanagan to show this. And like all those guys that I mentioned in that back line there, Nick Kotrick has proven that he's a pretty good player because he's played Origin in the past, or at least he played one Origin game. He was in their 28 side last year.
He's a good player, not a centre. Good player.
Good player. Will Hopewade, same thing. He's played Origin in the past, played a bit of centre, played a bit of fullback, played a bit of half. All of these guys here, like, they've shown promise, or they've definitely shown that they belong in the NRL, but they haven't really shown that they can be like that, you know, that consistent next step type of guy. Like, Will Hoppewade's career has kind of dovetailed a little bit since returning to that Origin form briefly. Corey Allen, like, we're not going to split hairs here. He was playing Origin because our first choice fullback went down, and then our second choice fullback went down, and then our third choice fullback was put out to the wings. So, you know, still an Origin player, still did his job, taking Josh Adokar out, but I just want to see a little bit more from that 1 to 6. But I think Kyle Flanagan is just the guy to like put them into that next sort of area. And there, I see there a little bit, especially with no Ponga. With no Ponga, I definitely see a little bit of a tipping in the scales over to the Bulldogs' talent on paper. But then I look towards their forwards, and there's not much going on there. Like I spoke about in the few Broncos Bulldogs games that I watched last year. I really like to look at Luke Thompson. He's not named in the 21 or the 20.
Is it? What? Is he injured? What's going on? I didn't even realise.
He must be injured, right?
What?
Because he's not in there. So yeah, they're from 8 to 13. You've got Ogden, Katoa, your boy Hetherington, Adam Elliott, not Leach's boy, Corey Waddell, and the ever reliable Josh Jackson.
Yeah, that's really interesting about Luke Thompson. I actually did not click onto the fact that he's not named. So I need to get some news from somebody if he's injured or what, because that was their go-to guy in the forwards last year. Like, actually brought some mongrel to a team that was very much known for not having a lot of mongrel. The forwards is interesting for me though, because there's some decently big names that it seems like Barrett hasn't rated their performance in the off-season, or at least like doesn't see them in their future plans.
He's suspended. He suspended the first 4 games for eye-gouging James Taumolo last year.
Oh, well. Don't we look like we know a little fucking thing or two about the NRL, eh? Any which way. But there's some decently big names that have been left out of this team, or at least not in the favoured 13. So we got Chris Smith, Raymond Fatala-Mariner, and even Dylan Napa, right? So Fatala-Mariner and Napa find themselves on the bench, and that's a big fall from grace from Napa being an Origin player maybe 2 seasons ago, in the year of Big Papi, and now he's on the bench for the Bulldogs, like, uh-oh. And then you've got Smith out of the team altogether. And again, he was probably one of their better forwards last year. So obviously Barrett's got a new agenda. We'll see if that pans out. But preferred in the front row is my guy, Jack Hetherington. I said it in the preseason episode. Watch this game if you can, Spencer, because he's going to fucking rip someone's head off. He'll probably end up suspended for 5 weeks after this game, but he'll fucking rip in for the 50 minutes he is on the field before that.
Duly noted. Jesus Christ, a lot of energy. Fucking hell. You sure he hasn't played for the Raiders, or he's signed to the Raiders? You got a bit of energy about this kid.
I have energy about players who don't play for the Raiders. Come on.
Yeah. Adam Elliott is a dog cunt, but he's a good footy player. He should be coming on pretty fresh, pretty firing, start the season. Looking over to the Newcastle Knights forward pack. Look, on paper, muy bueno, I think. David Clemmer, Daniel Saifidi. Daniel Saifidi played for New South Wales last year and the year before. David Clemmer has played. He didn't play last year. They were saying that he was a bit of a mongrel, a bit of a grub in the Origin camp, so they left him out. But right there, you're starting props, both Origin worthy, and still, David Clemmer's starting to maybe not be at his best form, but still good enough. And you would think good enough against a Bulldogs pack. Jaden Brayley, shown a bit of promise at the Sharkies. I'd like, again, for whatever reason, that hooker spot for the Newcastle Knights just seems to be cursed for a while. Like, anybody that seems to go into that either has a shit season or they get injured. So maybe he can break that curse. Tyson Frizzell, moving on. Mitchell Barnett, ever reliable, gets through his work, gets his job done, doesn't do anything to wow you. So it's almost for me, like I'm looking at the Dogs back line and I'm going point Dogs, but I'm looking towards the forward pack and I'm probably going point Knights, to be honest. So at the moment, to me, like it's a relatively even battle, albeit it might not be a very entertaining one. Looking at the benches, like, man, Jacob Saifidi, his brother's really good. He's not bad. Brodie Jones, no. And Tuaso Sue, he was valuable to me about 5 years ago in fantasy because he was worth absolutely nothing, and the Tigers just played him a shitload of minutes. That's it. That's all I got for Tuaso Sue.
So yeah, I guess there's a good part about each team and a few question marks about each team. Overall, when talking about this matchup, I think the Knights are up against it because, like, all these injuries, the onus actually kind of turns to the Bulldogs now to prove that this offseason and all this hype isn't for shit. Like, if they can't beat this Knights team, who is so depleted at the moment with injuries, I think they're in for another long season. So I think they have to win this game. But I'm going to stick with the Knights because I think that they're still better. I mean, you're probably right about that forward pack. They're pretty good. But what I do want to see from that forward pack this season is, like, it needs to result in some cheddar. It needs to yield the results, which isn't either A, like not making the 8, which is a problem they have had in the last few seasons, or B, bowing out very fucking quickly.
And that's the worst type of, like for a footy fan, like that's where you never want your team to be. Like the Newcastle Knights, you look at their team on paper, you look at your expectations every single year, and nobody's tipping the Newcastle Knights to finish in the bottom 4 or to finish with the wooden spoon. And if they are, they've probably got rocks in their heads. But then on the flip side of that, I don't think anybody's tipping them to finish in the top 4 either. So they're kind of in that in-between, that no man's land at the moment. But I'm going to go again. I'm going to say the Dogs win on Friday night. I don't see the Newcastle Knights on like first game of the season. Like the amount of games that they have where they just literally rely on Kalen Ponga to just pull something out of his asshole, which he normally does. But there's been a little bit of drama in the off-season. Like it was confirmed today that Mitchell Pearce has signed a 1-year extension with the Knights. I think on from what media's been saying, a pretty good cut price deal. So that's sort of out of the way. But you've got Kurt Mann at number 6 over Blake Green. Got to change some things around. You got Connor Watson playing at number 13, who's coming off another injury ravaged season, and then you've got Tex Hoy in fullback. So like 4/5 of the spine, including the lock there, are guys that haven't really played a whole lot of footy together. And these, as long as Barrett can keep the grit and the grind that the Dogs had last season, these were the type of games that they would normally get over the line in, because the Newcastle Knights, as you said, they just need to result in some cheddar. Normally they just sort of fall away in games and they get grinded out. Like that Rabbitohs final game in week 1 was just atrocious. How do you go up 14-0 and then until the last minute of the game you get outscored 42 or 48-0? So I think the Dogs are going to grind them out here. I think Kyle Flanagan is going to make the Roosters seem like real dickheads for letting him go. And again, I don't think it's going to be a super entertaining, like flowy, fast game of footy, but I think the Dogs will get away about 20-12, maybe 20-16. And for the Knights, I think they just have to figure out the forward rotations. But it sucks for them because you don't think Kurt Mann's going to be a number 6. You think that's going to be Blake Green, and you know for a fact that Tex Hoy isn't going to be number 1. So until that spine is together again, it's going to be really hard for them to see results and start building off of that. So I don't think this loss for the Knights is going to impact their season in the long run. I just think this is the worst possible time to have Kalen Ponga out of your side, because this is a Dogs team that, despite how they look on paper, they've it's almost been in their DNA. Like they're nuggety, they got mongrel, and they find a way to win these games where the other team doesn't really know how to get into the grind of it, I suppose.
I think it's definitely going to be a close one. It is going to be a super close one, but I picture this game being like a smack in the mouth for the Bulldogs. It's going to be like an owner with a newspaper smacking that dog on the face. Down, boy, down. And so I think the Bulldogs are going to get the loss here, and they're going to have to sort of ask themselves a few tough questions that all the hype, maybe made sure they weren't thinking about in the off-season. But now that brings us to the second game of our Friday night footy, and I know it's one that you're super excited about. I'll kick you off with the very biggest news out of this 17 named for the Brisbane Broncos. Brodie Croft gets the nod ahead of Tom Dearden. How does it make you feel?
Not good at all. Look, this could be a long one. It's time to get yourself a drink, maybe a coffee, maybe a little snack, because Spencer's going to go on a bit of a rant here. Let's start with the good from this Broncos team list before we go to the bad. It's going to be a quick, good segment. 8-13 don't look too bad, in all honesty. Like, looking at that, so you got TPJ, Matt Lodge, starting props, Jake Turpin and hooker, Alex Glenn, and Jordan Big Sexy Ricky as the edge rowers, and then you've got my boy Paddy C in lock. You factor into that as well that we have Payne Haas suspended for the first 3 games of the year. So once he comes back, that's looking really good, because any one of TPJ, Lodge, or Carrigan coming off the bench is fucking huge for us. Huge. So that's a good. Let's get to the not so good, and that's our bench. So again, the first 20 minutes of games for the Broncos this year, we're going to be in it with that forward pack. Like, unless there's some kind of monumental fuck up, most 20-minute, start of the 20-minute games, we should be in the arm wrestle. But the issue is when that first rotation of forwards comes off, greeting them is going to be John Asiata, Thomas Flegler, Ethan Bullimore, who I rate.
He is good. I watched both the trial games for the Broncos, and he was out and out their best player. He impressed me way too much. So it's good that Kevy's playing eyes up coaching, and he saw that, and he's got him in the team, because I didn't think he was going to get picked. All the predicted 17s had nothing to do with Ethan Bullimore.
But this is the issue. This is where I'm getting at. Those are good things. Yeah, with Ethan Bullimore, I didn't wasn't sure if he was going to get picked. But the number 17 is Ben Ta'u. And Ben Ta'u 9 years ago, fuck yeah. Oh, fuck yeah. When the Broncos were still wearing those wow sight and sound jerseys, those skin-tight Nikes, he's just not the same guy anymore, and nor can you expect him to be. The issue is that the guys that are starting in front of him are not good enough to lay a big enough platform to him to work off of. And then you spoke about Ethan Bullimore. This is where things get really, really bad. All right. These are our reserves, so our 18 to 21. Tom Dearden, Reece Kennedy, Richard Kennar, and Corey Pakes. Reece Kennedy, if it wasn't for the Broncos, would not be in an NRL 21. That's just the sad reality. He's 26 years old. He's somewhere between meh and bleh. Richie Kennar, the exact same thing. We're just so devoid of talent in the outside backs that he has to be there. And Corey Pakes, although it has shown some promise, was fucking brought into the fire last year against the Roosters, and he's still a good 2 to 3 years that I hope we never have to see him at the end of. Not because of him, but just because that should, Jake Turpin should take up the role as the hooker for the Broncos moving forward. So when the guys outside of year 17, out of those 4 guys there, Tom Dearden's the only one that's really NRL quality. And then that's another issue that brings me to the back line, is that Tom Dearden isn't in the starting side. Now, before I get into the rant of it, my one thing that I will say for Kevy, because don't forget, Broncos fans, we do have Kevy.
This year, you have Kevy.
All right? We do have fucking Kevy. We have Kevy, so get your war paint ready.
Grab yourself a bevy.
Grab yourself a bevy, hey. Gonna need about fucking 12 on Friday night. Look, the Eels are a really, really good team. Finished top 4, from 1 to 17, talent all over the park. In my optimistic, hopeful mind, I'm thinking that Kevy isn't putting Tom Dearden out there because he doesn't want to spoil the broth, so to say, and throw him out there to the Wolves and watch him just get absolutely fucking capitulated. Because he's still a young guy, and he's not, we're at the trial game in Redcliffe. He's not the biggest dude. He's a pretty small guy. Not as small as Alfie, but fucking not too many footy players are. But he's in that kind of ballpark. I wonder if this is really just... Because I've seen Brodie Croft as a number 6 over a number 7. I wonder if this is a little train and trial, if you will, for Anthony Milford, and if he can't pull his finger out, he then gets turfed. Brodie Croft comes into 6, and Tom Dearden comes into 7. That's what I think is going to happen in the long run. Because, again, our backline is so bad that I wouldn't envy the job of any halfback to try to make this team click. Like, Jermaine Azarko is... Honestly, he's close to taking the mantle as the ultimate rocks or diamonds, because there are some things that he does and some things that he did in that trial game. I was like, oh, yeah, here we go. And then there are some things that he does that just makes you go, oh, fuck. Xavier Coates. Just replace Jermaine Azarko's name with Xavier Coates. Herbie Farnworth. I do rate Herbie Farnworth. I think he's fucking good. He's solid. He should stay in there. Tessie New, again, looked solid without being spectacular. And then David Mead. Dear God. Dear God. The fact that we have David Mead as our starting winger is just bad news bears all the way around. So looking at that 17, we're fucked. Even when Payne Haas comes back, we're still fucked. Even when Katoni Staggs comes back, we're still fucked. He comes back in round 12 or round 13, we might not have a win by then, in all honesty. Like, the way that they played, Kevy is going to have to do a complete turnaround just to get this team even to... not even to click, not even to gel, just to buy into what's going to happen, because there is going to be some long roads ahead. And... man, that team... And it's not even like the fact that we're going up against the Eels. Like, the Eels roster, you'll get into it, is obviously so much better than the Broncos. But it's also the fact that the Broncos roster just leaves you so just disappointed, I guess, as a Broncos fan is where I put it.
Yeah, I'll also start with the good, and that is, like, praise be to the footy gods that Big Sexy has been picked. Again, you can only read so much into the predicted 17s that come out, which is really just, news media trying to stay relevant or keep you engaged with their outlet. Right. Literally, they just do, like, the amount of different predicted 17s I saw, and particularly, as a Raiders fan, you'd be like, you do realise that Jared Croker's out for the first 4 rounds, right? So why do you keep putting him at number 3 in your round 1 team? And it just really shows you, like, if there's a thing or two in every team, I think, that comes out. If you're a real fan, you just go, fuck, you guys don't know what you're talking about. Right. But, like, so thank fuck that he actually has been picked, because he is the only guy that can fit the shoes, and the big fucking shoes, of David Fifita. So excited to see him in the team. And then there's, yes, the Brodie Croft getting the nod ahead of Tom Dearden. And that experiment last year, it didn't last very long. And this...
Even Milford looked fucking good the first 2 games.
The first 2 games. It almost seemed like a different season after that, right? But, if you're going to troll that combo and it didn't work out, and then you went away from it for pretty much the rest of the season, right? And then now we're going back to square one, the same spot that you started in 2020. Like, it's a definition of insanity. Or, more importantly, it's kind of a decision-making bias that it can be called path dependence or confirmation bias. And that is... And I really hope that Kevy didn't do this shit. But it's... You've spent so much money on both Brodie Croft and particularly Anthony Milford that you feel like you have to stick with them. And it's just like, no, cut your losses and go with your best 2. So I obviously we don't see in the background of what's going on between Kevin Walters and Anthony Milford. But I think if he's facing reality and he has been around for those, or watching the last couple seasons that Anthony Milford's played, he has to go, fuck, I know we've spent $1 million on you, mate, but honestly, you're not our best 6 or 7. We should have Croft at 6, because he's a better 6 than you are, Anthony, and then I should have Dearden at 7, because Dearden's a better 7 than Croft and Milford. But unfortunately, instead we've got fucking Milford at 6, Croft at 7, and it's just this mishmash of fuckery. And I just can't believe that he's still going to keep trying it. So it's just the case that they've spent $1.5 million or whatever it is on Croft and on Milford, that they feel like they need to play them. And if they were actually serious about it, they wouldn't at least have Milford.
I can get why Kevy might want to play Milf, for example, because when the Broncos made the 2015 grand final, Kevy Walters was a halves coach, and you could, say what you want. Like, the team was obviously much more talented, but he would have played a pretty big role in getting Ben Hunt and Anthony Milford playing to the level that they were. And that's the sword I'm willing to die on, or the cliff I'm willing to fall. Anyway, Anthony Milford's peak is so fucking good. Like, when Anthony Milford was on, he was fucking, like, on. Like, yeah, like, not even, like, like a good half. Like, a guy that literally, in the blink of an eye, could just take the game, like, and just turn it on its head. So I'm happy with that, like, but my thing is that the continual progress of Anthony Milford and Brodie Croft shouldn't be at the expense of Tom Dearden. So it should be, like, because we never really got to see Tom Dearden and Anthony Milford together. And the way that I'm looking at it is the Broncos always seem to do this shit. Like, we always bring these halves in that are, like, since Ben Hunt left, that are just kind of the same. Like, Cody Nikorima, like, what happened when he went to the New Zealand Warriors and he was asked to do something that he's good at, not be second fiddle to a guy that's good at equally the same things. He's flourished and he's played really well and he's looked like a really good investment. Bro, it either has to be Brodie Croft or Anthony Milford. And with using that logic, I want to pick Anthony Milford because he's been with Kevy Walters before. He's proven that he can be a Dally M-worthy player of the year when he's on his best form. And if the issue is just him getting a bit of confidence, a bit of fitness back, then fuck yeah. But Tom Dearden is that game managing type of half that Ben Hunt was similar in, where, like, yeah, he's going to have some growing pains, but I would rather them build up a chemistry and build up a rapport and have the Broncos lose the first 5 or 6 games of the season and then have, Tom Dearden show some progress and get that partnership going. But my thing is I don't think Kevy Walters thinks that Tom Dearden's ready for that. Because I think Kevy Walters knows. Like, he's tried to be all coy and smart in the media. He knows that the Broncos are going to get fucking belted in the first month of the season. Because you'd be fucking stupid not to. And if we don't get belted in the first month of the season, it's because teams played poorly, not because we played well. So he's obviously thinking that maybe Tom Dearden can't take that right now. Because it makes sense, right? If Tom Dearden comes out and plays shit in the first month of the season, then the Broncos can lowball him an offer and go, well, you haven't looked that good, so we want to offer you $500,000 instead of $650,000. But hiding him away and sewing him away for the sake of Brodie Croft and Anthony Milford just makes no sense to me. And it's like you fucked up so many developmental gains and pathways through letting guys like Jai Arrow walk. Getting rid of fucking Josh Maguire, which stunted the growth of your younger forwards in there. You've cut your losses on guys like Joe Afengawi. You've let David Fafita walk while paying other guys. Like, we can't fuck this up with Dearden because, like, while all this stuff was going around, the thing that was, like, the next step for the Broncos was a halfback. And for years and years, we've been hearing about this Tom Dearden guy that's going to come in and just blow our socks off. Just give the cunt a chance. Just give him a crack.
If you have to play Milford, play him at fullback. That was another experiment that only lasted a couple of weeks, and it was because he also underperformed there. But if he's going to underperform... Yeah, but if he's going to underperform somewhere, underperform at fullback, where at least he doesn't have the weight on his shoulders of being a playmaker and he makes these wrong decisions in the playmaking role. So at least he could be a fullback that just, you can get the ball in your hands and just go. Or you can chime into a back line or whatever. So, like, that was an experiment, like, at the very least, that they could have kept going with, which keeps Milford in the team, so you're not wasting $1 million, but you do get to finally settle in with Croft at 6 and Dearden at 7. Now, we've spent a lot of time on the Broncos, but I'm going to quickly jump into the Eels. Look, this is going to be a fucking massacre, this first round, because you basically got 2 teams that are at polar opposites of at least, like, their roster. One is, like, still trying to figure its shit out after obviously a very poor 2020. And then you've got the Eels, who are the most settled roster in the entire league. They've barely changed a thing because I guess they didn't really have to. While they obviously didn't make it to the prelims, like, they led the league for a little bit and they have used their cap space and yeah, so, like, there's a lot of things there that told them they didn't have to make many changes. So you look at their 1-13 at least, it's pretty much the same as what it was. So they're not going to have to go through any teething pains, that sort of shit. They're going to come out firing round 1. That's the most scary thing for the Broncos this Friday night. The only change is that Tom Opachik has won the Eels centre position race by default because Michael Oldfield is out injured and Michael Jennings is currently door-knocking the western suburbs of Sydney looking for driveways he can shovel for a $5.
Oh, get fucked.
Carry on. I didn't expect that one. That's good.
Looking at the Eels bench, though, I am surprised to say that I think that this bench looks better than what they did have last year. Papali'i and Hipgrave are both starting quality forwards. I mentioned this in the last team matchup. They're both starting quality forwards that are just so happen to be playing at the Eels because they want to be part of a team that they believe can go all the way. So this is going to be one of those examples where the first interchanges for the forward pack of the Eels is actually going to be of equivalent quality. And it's going to be barely any impact to the performance of the Eels from the 20th to 40th or 20th to 60th minute. So it's going to be a bloodbath on fucking Friday night.
It's ridiculous looking at the Broncos roster and looking at the Eels. Like you said, there's a team that has sorted their shit out, played well together. They know all the combinations. They know all the plays. And then the Broncos, right? But my thing for the Eels that just makes them so dangerous and what I love watching in a footy team is their back row. So Nathan Brown, again, he's probably going to spend a few weeks of the year either injured or suspended. Spoiler alert, mainly suspended. But fuck me, no one likes running at him. He is just an absolute savage. And then Ryan Madison and Sean Lane are just two big, mobile, can tackle, can play the ball, can run over the line and get a try. Like, that's what I love in my second row is they just are Ryan Madison is a gun. He's a fucking gun. So that's going to cause us dramas, particularly because Brody Croft has shown that he can defend well, but Anthony Milford is just going to be getting targeted all night long. And then we spoke about with the Newcastle Knights, like their front row, or their starting front row. How about the Eels? Regan Campbell-Gillard and Junior Paulo. Junior Paulo's about as wide as he is fucking tall. And he's still nearly fucking 6 foot, mind you.
And fast, and a great ball player.
Yeah. And then Regan Campbell-Gillard has had an unbelievable career resurgence after breaking his jaw and leaving the Penrith Panthers. That 50-metre try that he scored last year was phenomenal. Like, if you can't watch a front rower score a 50-metre try and you don't get half a chub, you don't like rugby league. He's just, and that mustache that he's got to go with it as well is muy bueno.
It hides the fact that he's a really ugly cunt.
It doesn't matter how ugly he is. He's going to get, I guarantee it, TPJ is going to try running at him. He's going to put him on his ass. And then on the next set of 6, TPJ is going to give away a penalty trying to take his head off and TPJ will get suspended. Mark my words, it'll happen. And Sportsbet aren't even taking bets for it because they're that sure it's going to happen. I asked them.
I would add that to your bold predictions, but it's pretty clearly going to happen.
That's just on me multi. No bold predictions here. And then Reid Marnie, solid, without being too spectacular, just does the job of what a hooker should do. Dylan Brown, Mitchell Moses, spoken about at length in the preview. Mitchell Moses, can go missing, but in a game like this, these are the games that make Mitchell Moses look like he's worth $1 million because he is going to look very, very good. Very, 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 very good. Mike Acevo, Blake Ferguson, the Broncos tend to have a drama against athletic wingers because their outside backs aren't normally of the greatest quality and the forwards are normally getting belted so much that it just causes the defense to compress. And Clinton Gutherson, God willing he stays healthy this year, should have another fantastic season. And yeah, are we doing predictions?
Yes, man. I want to hear your thoughts.
All right.
Can the Broncos win this one?
It'll be, after 20 minutes, it'll be 10-6 to the Parramatta Eels. By halftime, it'll be 24-6 to the Parramatta Eels. And by full time, it'll be 48-10.
That's very in-depth.
The first 20 minutes, I'll put together the first 4 games that the Broncos play, the first 20 minutes will be winning football. The next 60, we'll just shit the bed. We won't even have a bed to shit in. We'll just shit.
You're probably also basing this off of the trial game that we both attended at Redcliffe a week or 2 ago. The Broncos came out looking off the hook, motherfucker. And then So, yeah, look, I thought I had a fucking big margin, and now I realise that I'm being very conservative compared to your prediction. I've got the Eels winning by 26, and the way that they're going to do it is by turning up.
Calling the game off after 60 minutes? 26 points? What?
You poor thing. No wonder you're barracking for the Rabbits all this year. All right. Next up, we got our first Saturday night game of the year, which is the Warriors versus the Titans. So these are the two teams that I've got picked for 7th and 8th. So interesting to have this matchup so early on in the season as a really good barometer for where each of them is at. Unfortunately, I think the trajectory of each team is going to be a little bit different. So while I think they will still finish 7th and 8th, I think the Titans are going to come out absolutely fucking firing, and the Warriors are probably going to take a little while to get going. So you've probably got a bit of an insight there as to how I think this game's going to play out. But just looking at the team list that came out today, big boys deluxe for the Warriors, as we expected. Except for the absence of two, which were Kane Evans and Jack Murchie. Now, at first, I was fucking livid about the Jack Murchie omission. I was like, are you kidding? He was their best player at the end of last year. And then I happened to talk to somebody from the Warriors who mentioned that he's out injured. I haven't seen any notice or news that he's out injured, but apparently he is. But what about Kane Evans? He's one of their big signings, right? And has he gone from being a bench player at the Eels, a verified contender, to being left right out at what is pretty undoubtedly an inferior team in the Warriors? I don't understand this one. And then also you've got Jazz Tavanga, who got the punt back to the bench, who was probably their best player in 2019 at the very least. So interesting for their part. And then the Titans, well, they're without Cameron Smith to start the season, so at least we've got a fucking answer on that one. And then, the big one was Philip Sammy has gone from being a Queensland debutant on the wing to can't even get a wing spot at the Titans. So they've favoured Corey Thompson, who, man, honestly, he is a very good player. So I feel for Sammy, but pretty good player there in Corey Thompson.
Yeah, I'm leaning more towards my thoughts towards this game. Dave Fafita is just very, very good at footy. Tino is also very, very good at footy. Fotuaika is very, very good at footy. Jared Wallace is so-so at footy, but that forward pack is going to be very tough to deal with. Maybe not in the first 15 or 20 minutes, because, as has been made mention, the Warriors seem to be going back to the roots of the yesteryear, trying to build up a big, intimidating forward pack that's going to bowl teams over. With the speed of the game, the jury is very much out on whether that's going to work. I did think Philip Sammy was a little bit hard done by, but the Don, you can't get rid of the Don. He's either the most unathletic, good footy player I've ever met, or the most athletically gifted bad footy player I've ever met, because he just doesn't really do anything, and then at the end of the game, he just has 2 tries. He doesn't do anything in Saki. He just has 2 tries at the end.
He's the Titans' Corey Oates. Watch the way he runs. They're the same player, except Corey Oates now wanted to be a second rower, which saw him get booted out of the team. And Anthony Don still doing what he does best.
It's grinding. That's what he's doing. Fucking grinding. Look, I don't care too much for either of these teams, if I'm going to be brutally honest with you. But I am very interested to see how the Warriors go, because they talk about all the big boppers that they have. But at any one time, they're going to have 4 props on the field, because Fusatua and Kemba Marlowe, you can pretty much jot those 2 bastards down for 300 metres a game. And they're fucking huge. They've got the finishing ability of wingers. But the biggest thing about them is that they keep Tuivasa-Sheck so fresh, because they relish taking those runbacks off the kickoffs. Off the kick returns, and giving Tuivasa-Sheck a little bit of a rest. And they're just so fucking big that when they get close to the line and they're so long, is that you're going to have to put in a really good effort to even stop them getting close to the line, let alone just putting it down and scoring. So that's going to be fun, because that's just a good brand of footy. But then, looking outside of that, Ewan Aitken and Petahiku, they're alright, they're not great. Tohu Harris is awesome. He just gets through work that not many footy players would. But looking through the rest of the roster, it's just something that I just want to see play out first, because we spoke about it when 15 people are going right and then one person's going left. your first instinct is to say that the person going left is in the wrong, or that they have bad information. That's what it's like with the Warriors this season, is that they've gone completely against the grain of the game speeding up, the play of the ball's getting faster, there's less stoppages in play, there's more 6-agains, yada, yada, yada. So we need to get more mobile and fitter and smaller. Whereas the Warriors have gone, fuck that. We're going to get bigger and we're going to punish you. Let's see if that plays out. That's going to be a really interesting thing to see. And also is going to be an awesome first audition for Tino and David Fifita, where that first 20 or 25 minutes, there's going to be some big hits. Some boys are going to be getting belted around, and it's going to be fun to see if Tino and Fifita can stand up to that challenge and then go out for the rest of the game. Because looking at the bench and just knowing, watching games with David Fifita or the Broncos, unless they're up or down 20, he should be playing 80 minutes. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that first 25-minute stint goes for him, because as we saw in the All-Stars game, he's just better than everybody else, which is just so astounding because of how young he is. But it's just, guys just seem to bounce off of him like pinballs. Let's see if, what happens when he runs at Adam Fanua-Blake.
It was beautiful looking at that 17 come out for the Titans today and just seeing David Fifita's name right next to Fasua Malawi's name. What a fucking combo for the back row of the Titans.
And Proctor's not too shabby either. He can get the job done.
No wonder the Titans fans are hyped this season, because those two names just by each other's side looks great. Imagine how they're going to play.
And Futuweka as well. So right there, you've got three of your 5 forwards are young, developing Queensland State of Origin players. Fuck me dead.
So they've really got a up-and-coming forward pack, which does lean into, this hype is real. And you know what, it's so interesting. I was watching that Building Titans doco last night, the 4-part series, which, man, it reminded me of the kind of film and content that you get for the NFL. So, if you can get it on NRL.com or Foxtel or whatever, or KO, watch it, man. It is good content. Just getting into, what's led them to this point. And if they end up obviously going on to have a great season, this is the precursor to that season, is so insightful. I loved it. And it takes you back to Fasua Malawi's upbringing. And no wonder he's the kind of guy and the kind of player that he is, because he is from such humble beginnings. He shows you this farm in Gympie or outside Gympie that he's from. He ain't your standard city boy, always been thrashing other fucking Broncos Challenge Cup players here in this big city. He was playing for Wide Bay rep teams, which, if you're not from here, Wide Bay just gets fucking trounced by every other team. Central Queensland, North Queensland, and of course Southeast Queensland just fucking bully Wide Bay.
It almost looked too instinctual how when Queensland were getting belted in the Origin game that he just found his fist to Payne Haas's head. But that makes sense now. If they're always getting belted, it's just a common reaction, right? Someone talks shit and you're down 20.
So he seems like a genuinely good dude, has all the right character traits to lead this team to success. Maybe it's not this year. We both agree that it's probably not going to be a premiership year for these guys, and you don't even think they're going to make the 8. But I think over the years to come, he was begging. He said this to David Fifita. He said, "Fifita, come here, man. We're gonna build something." They're there now. Let's see what happens. As I said, these are my 7th and 8th place finishes, but I think the Titans will be too pumped up and they're going to come out with a bang. So Titans by 16 in this game.
Ooh. I got Titans. Tyrone Peachy played phenomenal at the end of last season in number 13. He's coming off the bench. That's an awesome little spark plug. Like you said, we talk about the guys that aren't in the team. They still have Phillip, Sammy and Herman SASA, who can't even crack the top 17 at the moment. Having that type of depth is always going to be a good thing because injuries just happen in the NRL. I'm much of the same. I think the Titans are they're gonna flex a little bit on Saturday. I think the Warriors will still look good, but the other thing as well is that these big boppers are just going to have to get a little bit of conditioning into them first, I think. And just, you made mention, David Fifita and Tino. If we're going to pick the top 3 players in this game, I think we could pretty easily say that it's David Fifita, Tino, and Roger Tuivasa-Sheck. Titans are a more top-heavy team. They've got the most depth. The Warriors will give them some dramas. Like, it's not, but the Warriors will have some stints where they look really good. But I think just the size that they're running with, I just don't think it's going to work straight away. And, like, the Titans roster just looks fantastic. And as long as Ashley Taylor and Jamal Fogarty can just stay at the level of last year, like, even if there's a little bit of an uptick, which there should be because you've got Fotuaika, Kevin Proctor, Dave Fafita, Tino, Jared Wallace, Sam Lasone, Tyron Peachy coming off the bench. Like, they're just fucking stacked. Which pains me to say as a Broncos fan, but yeah, it's going to be... Jury's still out on how good their season's going to be, but this will be a good game for the Titans. They should easily handle the Warriors, I think.
Nice. Still don't think they're going to make the 8, though?
Look, it really just depends, like, how quickly Tommy T comes back from his injury, and more importantly, how good the Seagulls look or don't look against the Roosters 4:30 p.m. the game after the Warriors and Titans game. And looking through that team list to start, you like that segue? It's a good segue. They're in dramas. They are in fucking dramas. Like, not even looking at the Roosters team list. Because the Roosters, well, you know, at this point, they're just the Roosters. Little spoiler alert. Lindsay Collins is now starting for them, and Rhea Hargreaves is coming off the bench. Oh no. Oh no to every team in the NRL. Jared Rhea Hargreaves is literally one of the best, if not the best, player in the NRL for dictating momentum and for just, what even is the word? Like, controlled aggression, I guess. The amount of guys' skin that he gets under and the way that, like, the Roosters either look good or poorly with him on or off the field. Lindsay Collins showed at the end of last year, particularly with his Origin call-up, that he's turning into a quality player. If you can have him and Taukeiaho set a good platform on that first stint, and then you have Rhea Hargreaves coming on, that's fucking dramas. That is dramas, because Rhea Hargreaves might be a fucking grub, but he is a really, really good footy player, and just, like, the things that he does, if he played for any of the teams I supported, I'd love the bloke. It's just that it happens that he plays for the Sydney Roosters. So that there is problems in of itself for every single team in the league.
But what's the go with it? That was just so surprising for me, though, that he's coming off the bench. Like, is it a strategy? Is it an injury? Is it form? Like, why is he off the bench? Why haven't we heard about this up until today?
I just think this is what the Roosters do really, like, they do best. They don't wait for news reports to come out of, like, oh, this guy should be getting dropped, this guy should be getting promoted. They look within internally and they go, you know what? Lindsay Collins proved that he should be the next man up, and it's just that thing. Like, would you rather have the old guy that doesn't have as much tread left on his tyres just grinding out more of his career? Whereas, like, hey, if we turn Rhea Hargreaves into a bench impact prop, we could probably prolong his career an extra year or two. The more that he's around this team, the more he instills the culture and the identity of what this team is. And Lindsay Collins right now, his career's on the up, so let him get out there. You know what I mean?
Oh, Lindsay Collins, he looks like a fucking Frankenstein. Like, he's an ugly, ugly man. But
it's hard.
But he plays like a monster. He does. Even in the trial match, when he came on for the Roosters against the Raiders, it was just fucking try and stop him. So, yeah. I guess, yeah, you've got to, at some stage, succession plan, and the Roosters have showed that they're pretty good at that. So,
well, you even look at their edge rowers, man. Like, Angus Crichton and Tupanua. Tupanua last year, I had no idea who he was. And then he just comes in because I think Orbison was hurt a little bit. Oh, no, Orbison was playing centre, and either way, Tupanua was playing edge rower. And he just looked fantastic. And it was almost just that thing of, like, yeah, like, just the rich getting richer. So they've got Angus Crichton and Tupanua as their starting edge rowers. After losing Mitch Orbison for retiring and not having Boyd Cordner for the first 12 rounds of the season, they still don't have fucking Victor Radley back yet. So they're missing two key guys in Victor Radley and Boyd Cordner. One, a New South Wales Origin incumbent, and Victor Radley, who, if he can stay healthy, which again, hope he does, should be playing Origin in the future. And their forward pack just looks fucking stacked. So stacked.
Yes, and the only other, I think, notable change to their roster is that Lamb has indeed got the first go at 6, but not 7. So not only do we not have Sam Walker coming in at 7, we've got Lamb at 6, and then Kiwi's going to 7. Now, that's very interesting. It has me thinking that perhaps they're trying to get Keary into a bit more of like a leading and playmaking role instead of the role he's been playing for so many years where he gets fucking belted in the head every second game. So that's a big change. Like, we really discussed in our preseason episodes how different we think that the 6 and 7 role has become. Like, there was a time there where they were kind of interchangeable, and some teams do still treat them as interchangeable. Broncos. But, like, they're actually very, very different roles. And Kiri moving to that role is very interesting, and it could be a masterstroke, or it could be two cooks in the kitchen.
And it remains to be seen, right? Because, like, they are very different in terms of, like, not the number they're wearing on their back, but you look at the Rabbitohs. Adam Reynolds and Cody Walker, two very different players. Jerome Hughes, Cameron Munster, two very different players. They do different roles. They're supposed to do different things. So it will be interesting to see how this plays out, because are they just putting number 7 on Luke Keary's back just for the sake of it, or now is he actually becoming the first receiver? Because they paid him a lot of money to keep him there. And obviously those concussions are, the more of those you rack up, the bigger a problem they become down the line. I'm interested to see how Luke Keary plays as that first guy, because for for all of his career up to date, he's relished being given that service and that ball and being able to sort of play off the back of it. Like, famously won a grand final with the South Sydney Rabbitohs in 2014, playing 6 to Adam Reynolds 7. And through all the Sydney Roosters premierships that he's been with, it was Cooper Cronk in half, playing that very much like controlling the tempo, controlling the game, solid kicking game, like putting guys in the right position. But that sort of has fallen onto him. So is that are they doing what the Broncos are doing with the Brodie Croft, Anthony Milford situation, where they're just seeing how Lachlan Lamb goes at 6 to then determine whether Sam Walker comes in? Because at the moment, Sam Walker is, if I'm not mistaken, at 21. So they're at least putting him in the extended bench to at least show that, hey, he is being considered. He might be an option down the line. Is that, are they doing that just to, try things out? Because against a Manly team that's as depleted as this, it's not a bad game to sort of just, throw some shit on the wall and see what sticks, right?
I mean, you call this Manly team a depleted one, but this is the best Manly team possible, minus Tommy T and Cade Cuss.
Yeah, but Tommy T's really good.
I know that. Like, he literally carries this team. But, they are becoming, in my mind, a fast contender for the wooden spoon. Like, I didn't think that they were. You had them in the top 8, I think, and I had them, near the top, 12th, let's say. I fucking can't remember. But at this point, I'm like, they're going to get blown off the park. So, not only do we have Croker starting at 9 with Cuss out injured, so, that's interesting because Croker's not a 9, but the point that brings up is that the Sea Eagles don't have a hooker. They don't have one. Like, I understood that Denny Levi wasn't the best hooker in the world. Like, no way, shape, or form did anybody believe that. But it was fucking divine intervention that they even had him, because obviously they had Manasi Fainu, who was done for domestic violence or whatever. So he's not coming back anytime soon, as far as I'm aware. So they had one hooker, and then they fucked him off. So they didn't let him get signed by someone else. They literally released him, and now he's signed with the North Devils, who is a Queensland Cup team. So he doesn't have an NRL contract. And the Manly Sea Eagles, for some reason, think that this is still a better option to have no hooker than to have Danny Levi. So, like, without a hooker, let alone a top-tier one, what chance do you really stand to win games in the rugby league, in the National Rugby League? Like, this is going to be a bigger bloodbath than Eels Broncos. I've got a couple of drubbings penciled in for this weekend. There's going to be some teams who get schooled.
Yeah, I don't see the Manly Sea Eagles winning this game, because I just think the Roosters are far too good, way more talented, way more polished. Even with Lachlan Lamb at 6, you can make the inference that they're just going to overpower them. But I don't think this is going to be panic stations for the Sea Eagles, because I don't think the best version of the Manly Sea Eagles could be at the Sydney Roosters right now. And that's okay, because I still have them tipped for that 6th position. They've spoken at length that they think this Jason Saab, he's pretty good outside back. He's pretty athletic. Josh Schuster he's been left out of the 17, but he's a young, promising playmaker that could potentially make some noise for them going forward. I do find it interesting that Tavita Funa is playing number 14 for them because he's an identified centre/winger. So again, a little bit of an odd choice for me. Maybe that has something to do with Brad Parker playing centre and Dylan Walker being in fullback. I'm not sure.
Maybe you're playing reshuffle at some stage of the game.
Yeah,
maybe they've penciled this in for a fucking loss, and they're like, all right, let's put Tavuna on the bench, and at some stage in the game, we're going to do this and this and this.
The only way that I see this version of Manly's team being competitive until Tommy T comes back is that Daly Cherry Evans is going to have to become not even he's going to have to become the top half for this team to have a fighting chance in most games. But also, like, Adam Fanua-Blake played really well. Now, Josh Aloiai is a good player, but whether he's a very easy to see upgrade from Fanua-Blake, I don't think he is. The back row outside of Jake Turbo, even through the bench as well, leaves much to be desired. And Kieran Foran, although he's quality and I think that he's a really good player, he's the type of player that I love watching play because he's nuggety, he works hard in defence, he's got a good kicking game, he's got all the fundamentals. He just can't stay healthy. And as a running number 6, not a running number 6, but just as a number 6, you like them to be able to take the line on. And if you watch any old highlights from those early Manly Seagull Grand Final teams and premiers that had Cherry Evans and Foran as a halves partnership, Kieran Foran was playing very differently to what he will be now. So, and look, Dylan Walker just... Not anything against Dylan Walker, but just Dylan Walker at fullback versus Tommy T at fullback is just fucking apples and oranges, isn't it? It's just couldn't be more different. So that's going to be very difficult for them to try to figure out. So, look, if we're going to predictions now, like you said, you think there's going to be a drubbing. I see the Roosters scoring at least 30, and I see Manly maybe scoring 12. So I'll say maybe like 36-14 to the Roosters.
I think Roosters by 40.
Ooh, wow.
Maybe.
Alrighty. So 6:30 p.m. Saturday night footy. Last game. Panthers and Cowboys. My oh my. Talking about bloodbaths. I reckon this could be just one of those. The Panthers are just better in every single position than the Cowboys, bar one. That's lock. Other than that, it's bad for the Cowboys. Really bad. The halves, just a little sprucer. Jerome Luai, Nathan Cleary versus Michael Morgan and Jake Clifford. And not the Michael Morgan, the corpse of Michael Morgan at this point. You look at the back three. Dylan Edwards, Charlie the Ferrari Staines, and Brian To'o versus Scott Drinkwater, Kyle Felt, and the world's highest paid winger / retired NFL player, Valentine Holmes. The fact that they're paying Valentine Holmes nearly $1 million a year is fucking criminal. Holmes should be tried. How did he get away with that?
Because they thought he could play fullback, and very quickly they realised, fuck, he was just on the end of some really good ball playing at the Sharks. We should probably put him at the back of our ball playing. Fuck, we don't have very good ball playing.
Ball playing as in he caught the ball in the wing and just scored the try.
Yes.
He played with the ball.
Yes.
Fuck, man.
At the Cowboys, they don't even do that very well, so...
It's Dramaville for the Cowboys. Like, even the weakness, I suppose, from the Panthers. You spoke about the Eels and how they have little to no roster turnover. The Panthers, again, are pretty close to that, obviously. Mansour out, Charlie Staines in. That was a move that they wanted to do, so you can't really say anything against them doing that. Pull Momirovski.
Mr. Alphabet, mate. Yeah. Momirovski
is playing centre as compared to Brent Naden. Yeah, old Coke fiend himself. Stephen Crichton and Brian To'o will have another season. They were just damaging last year. Stephen Crichton was Dally M Centre of the Year. Probably unlucky not to be in the New South Wales side. Probably cost them an Origin series, I'm going to be brutally honest. But now we look at the forward pack, and everybody there is a proven commodity for the Panthers, except for Moses Leota in that role as starting prop. So it's not necessarily that he didn't play like poorly last season. It's just James Tarmow, definitely filled in a role in a job and was very good at doing that. It's going to be interesting to see how they do that, how he goes in that position. Looking at that Panthers team, I don't see them losing enough where they aren't going to be beaten by in my opinion, any of the top 4 teams. The top 4 teams around them, that being the Raiders, Rabbitohs, Roosters, Storm, and Parramatta. I think those are the only 5 teams that are really going to have a crack at beating them this year. But one team that's definitely not going to have a crack is the fucking Cowboys. This is going to be we talked about dogs getting smacked in the nout or the face with a newspaper. Whatever a Cowboy gets smacked with, it's going to be from a Panther this weekend, let me tell you.
Yeah, I mean, very little changes, as you said. Very happy to see Momorowski get a go. Moses Leota also 100% earned that spot, man. He is a scary dude. Like, if you run at him, like he's basically got an orbit, wherein if you run anywhere within about a 1 to 2 meter radius of him, he's going to belt you. Don't run at him. He is so solid and so strong. So I'm really excited to see what he brings in the starting side. And then the other one that is actually really intriguing for me is that Kurt Capewell has moved from the bench into the second row in place of Liam Martin. Was it potentially Capewell's performances in the Queensland team where he was the unknown hero in that first game in particular? Or has Liam Martin done something to lose him that spot? Because they were hot on him last year, and he played well. The games that I watched at the Panthers, he was very, very good. Showed a little bit of pace, bit of strength. So that's a very big change for me. But overall, they haven't changed much else. That certainly weren't broken. And then for the Cowboys, it's exactly like I said in the preseason episode. They still don't know where to play the best players. Scott Drinkwater is playing 1. Tabuai Fido is playing 4. That's clearly not their best positions. And then Holmes is playing 5. And at least that one is right because that is his best position. Like I said, he is a great finisher. Particularly, I was astounded at some of the finishing that he did for the Queensland Maroons, even through our losing series. But then when I saw him, there's some people that just have this false vision of themselves, and that's like Nick Kotrick. Oh, yeah, I'm a centre. Play you in centre. Mate, you're not a centre. No, I am. Yeah, I am. Same with Valentine Holmes. Guys, I'm a fullback. You should pay me fullback money. North Queensland Cowboys yeah, we'll do that. I don't care how many injuries he had last year. The times when he was at full tilt still weren't shit. So now he's settled in at the wing. He's going to be the most highly paid wing for the fucking next couple of years. And then probably won't find a spot again because he's probably used to that money now and whatever. And then with Hess still in the back row, what chance do they really have, mate?
It's sad to look at their roster and how much it's unraveled. A few signings that they've made just didn't really work out what they were hoping. Jordan McLean is a big one for me. He came from the Storm, a pretty decent coin. Hasn't really lived up to the expectation. The idea of who Cohen Hess was going to be 3 or 4 years ago to now has drastically changed. Taumolo is still going to keep them in a lot of games they shouldn't be in, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to be for much. Jake Granville coming off the bench now, again, looked really promising early in his career, was a starting hooker for them in that grand final win, hasn't been able to take that next step. So yeah, I don't really have much more to say about this game. I think the Cowboys, obviously with a new coach, they're trying to go in a different direction. Maybe this opening 3 or 4 games of the season will be them just trying to figure out what are their best connections, how do we best utilize Jason Taumolo. I will say I like Josh McGuire coming off the bench because I just think Josh McGuire is a quality football player. But the guys that he's coming on for, and Francis Molo and Jordan McLean, but particularly as well, not looking at the season, we've done that before, but looking at this game, I just don't see any phase of this game that the Panthers aren't going to be in complete control. Because just in all facets of the game, in all facets in the roster, the Penrith Panthers again, and even then, we're talking the Cowboys beat them at lock with Taumolo. But that's nothing against Isaiah Yeo. Isaiah Yeo is still a quality football player. It's just Jason Taumolo is a fucking freak. But outside of that, just everywhere else is just Panthers.
Yeah, mucho punto for the Penrith Panthers for me. Panthers by 22.
Just because they pissed me off in the trial game, 56-0 Panthers. And Charlie the Ferrari to get 4 tries just to stick it up your ass. He can't score 3 tries a game. Well, he's gonna this weekend.
Mate, if he scores 3 tries a game for 10 games, you have to eat a hat. Why are you barracking for this?
Fuck, why'd you remind me and them, you dickhead?
I'm put down all the claims that you make, and I just remember.
All right, speaking of shellackings or bloodbaths, I reckon the West Tigers are feeling pretty confident this week. There's one thing they say about Tigers, that they like milk, and more importantly, lime milk. Alex, thoughts?
There's been a lot of applause given to the Tigers over the past week or so since they put a drubbing on that Eagles team. As I just mentioned, I don't really have much of an opinion of that Eagles team. Not only is the Eagles team not very good, but they also subbed out all their best players. So if the Tigers are sitting there going, here we fucking come, like, you beat a second-tier Eagles team. Like, it's time to come back to reality and think, like, do we have a chance? The answer is no. Not this week, not next week, and not for the next 23 weeks after that. The only problem that I have with this team that's been named, because it's pretty much to expectation, is Seb Chris has been named in the centres over Harley Smith-Shields and Taumolo in order to replace Jared Croker, who's still out with injury at the moment. Like, I can't believe that we've picked this guy because he's played before and he was all right. Not great, not that fast, not that big, not that strong, just all right. I think the only reason they have picked him is that when they did start him in the trial game against the Roosters, just that little bit more of experience and age and maturity allowed him to not be awed by the occasion. Harley Smith-Shields actually played better in the trials, but he had a couple of misreads, as an example. And I think it was just the occasion. He's young, like he's like 20, 21. Still put some big shots on, like absolutely crunched Suwali, maybe got a meaty or two. So I honestly thought Harley Smith-Shields was going to get the nod. So I can't believe that they've given this guy the nod, particularly because he's also not the future. Like, I think it's pretty clear in the Raiders organisation that he's not who they want. They want Harley Smith-Shields or Taumolo to be the next gen. And they've gone, like, this is just short-term thinking for me. I don't know. In Ricky, we trust. They've also gone for Siliva Havili on the bench over Tom Starling. I also can't believe that one. Like, Starling was an absolute star in the end of last season. And the only reason I guess this makes sense is that Havili can cover the forwards or most positions in the spine, bar fullback. Fuck, that'd be funny to see him at fullback. But Starling is an out-and-out hooker, and a pretty good one. So I think with this game in particular, they've maybe gone for that extra cover, but maybe as the season goes on, they will bring Starling back in. But it also shows that they've really backed Hodgson to go the full 80 and to have bounced back from his injury 100%. So good signs on that regard. What did you think? Siliva Havili over Starling?
I think that might just be Ricky keeping Tom a bit fresh, just in case Josh Hodgson does in fact get injured, because it's, no surprise or no spoiler that Josh Hodgson the last few years has had a pretty wretched run with injuries. Obviously last year was the ACL, but in past seasons as well, he hasn't been able to play the full 80, and he's one of those tough guys that he sort of plays through some injuries that maybe he shouldn't. Tom Starling did look great last season. Maybe it's just, Ricky, like, he had some issues like over the offseason. I think he got belted up by some cops. Like, maybe he hasn't fully recovered from that. Like you said, Siliva Havili is just a little pocket rocket. Again, like Joseph Paulo, just a little bit shorter, just about as wide as he is tall. Can cover all the positions. I think some coaches are maybe a little bit hesitant, or not hesitant, but fearful of what this new speed of the game is going to be. So maybe at least in these first weeks, like, just making sure that you have, rather than covering for injuries, let's cover just to make sure that we can get all of our guys through the full 80. Because as as great as Josh Papali is, and he is fucking great, he's the best prop in the NRL, he definitely works better playing in that 55 to 60 minute bracket, not into that 70 or 80. And he's your golden pony. You don't want to be losing Josh Papali in week 1. You want him to be slowly but surely come along as the season progresses. There's just like, it's almost too boring looking at some of these top teams team lists, because there's nothing really to talk about, because from, obviously you spoke about Sebastian Chris, Bailey Simonson you've spoken about in the past is the, natural replacement for Kotrick, but it's the same backline of last year. Just, it works. Like Charnsey, Simonson, Chris, Curtis Scott, Rappers, White and George Williams. Dalian Player of the Year in that mix there. Forwards, Papali, Hodgson stays healthy, he's been good. Tanamas Louis has shown a pretty big uptick in the last few years. I know you were never hot on him when he first came along. He's progressed really well. Origin prop now. The Raiders have the two Queensland Origin props. Hudson Young is looking like he could be making New South Wales this year. Elliot Whitehead, Nuggety Pom, can't ask for much more. Joseph Tarpany took a big leap in the finals last year. Let's see him, take that next step from the opening whistle this year. Asia Soliola, solid, like not spectacular, not great at any one thing, but can just do everything you need a prop to do. He runs hard, he tackles hard, he can play 80 if you need him to. Again, he loves and he relishes, much better suited to that. When Papali's not on the field, he comes on and just beats some guys up a little bit more, gets them nice and tenderized when Papas does. Ryan James, I think he's a fantastic signing as long as he stays healthy. Obviously, it's only been 800 days since he's played footy, so that for me is maybe a bit of a weird one. Like Josh Starling isn't in the top 17, but a guy that hasn't played footy in 800 days is. Obviously, that must mean that they've got some pretty good raps on him. I've heard, we hear it all the time, but he's been training the house down, so we'll see how that goes. And just looking to this week, that team compared to the Tigers, oh, Dios mío.
Yeah, I mean, I watched the trial game against the Roosters, and I wasn't overly impressed with Ryan James' contribution. Like, he played in both games, so they played the North Sydney Bears as a second grade sort of trial, and then they played the Roosters in the first grade trial. He played both. It was okay. I didn't see him, like, at least, like, he didn't carve up the second grade side, which a few other players did. Corey Horsburgh looked really, really good against the second grade side, which you would expect from a first tier, forward. So, look, I'm still really, really happy to see him back. I'm still really, really excited about what he could bring this year, but I definitely would want to see more from him now that he's made the side. But yeah, selecting the forwards this week was a little bit easier for Ricky with 2 of the start or potential starting forwards rubbed out to suspension. So the Cozzers. But I'm not sure that Gula, Horsburgh or Harawira-Naera is going to have an easy time unseating Young from the starting side or even Sutton and James from the bench. If anything, maybe Sia Soliola is going to be the one, like I said in the preseason episode, to make way for one of those guys. Like Horsburgh has had a lot of raps on him at the very least, so he might be one to come in, or CHN as well. Gula, I think, will probably be the casualty of those ones at the very least. But yeah, and then you compare it with the Tigers team, which not only did their roster not look that good when we looked at it at full strength, but this week in particular, they also don't have Dewey, probably one of their best 3 players, and then also Musgrove, who at least was good enough to make a representative team in the All-Stars game. So that just makes the job that little bit harder for the Tigers, and it also moves Mbai into the halves, who I like to call my Mr. Anti-Fix-It. Because as far as I'm concerned, wherever you put him in your Tigers team, he has now weakened that position for your team. Like, whether it's fullback or centre or 5'8", which is the 3 positions he typically does a little bit of the ring around the rosy with, he's not who you want in any of those positions. So they're still trying to fucking dovetail him in to these positions, and he's actually going to make it worse. And he was playing 5'8" this weekend. One of the most pivotal positions for the team, particularly with the underperformance that Luke Brooks has put forward for the last couple of years. And then your boys, the Leilua brothers, going shoulder to shoulder. Very exciting news, in particular for the Raiders' left edge attack.
The Tigers team list to me just doesn't really make much sense. Like, the biggest eye-opener for me, and like I would have to think that he's not going to be there come Sunday, but Tommy Talau playing 14, like, he's a centre/winger playing number 14, who they say he was benched for Asu Kapoa, who's playing number 5. The only reason why I can see them running with a wing/center on their bench is that they're that unsure that Joey Leilua can make it a full 80 in these new regulations, like this new speed of the game. Because the back line again, and David Nofaluma, don't get me wrong, he's a good winger. He scores tries, but he's not a guy that wins you games. He's a guy that gets on the NRL highlight videos at the start of the season because he does like a really cool play, once or twice a year. But he's not that guy. Like, wingers are never that guy. There's never been a team that has won purely through their wingers. Certainly teams that have been aided by their wingers, like the Melbourne Storm, for example. But you never that is not the base of where your backline wants to be. And then James Roberts and Joseph Leilua, oh man, if you're getting the best versions of those players, that's the best center pairing in the NRL. But the current versions of them that you're getting are not the best centers in the NRL. So that's...
Joey Leilua's off the burgers, mate. He's come out and said he's off the burgers, but I mean, weren't you the best center at the start of 2020? So why were you on the burgers? Didn't you want to come out and back those words up?
That's dramas for Tigers fans. And then I don't rate Luke Brooks to begin with, but then it came to my attention that it is the issue that the middles that they have just make if there's a job that can be made either easy or hard for a half, his job is made the hardest possible every fucking week. Because James Tarman is a great signing, don't get me wrong, but he played on a premiership contending Cowboys team to then go to a premiership contending Panthers team, and he's now at a West Tigers team where he's getting a big payday at the end of his career. I see James Tarman playing well, but I don't see him playing with the same fire that he had at any of those two clubs, and rightfully so. He deserves to get a payday. He's done his dues, and I think I worry that the Tigers are just going to make him lose his love and passion for footy more than anything. Joe Offer, I don't want to harp on it anymore. He's all right, but he's not you don't want him being your starting prop in the form that he's shown when he last touched the footy field. And then that back three of Garner, Luciano, and Alex Twal is just your footy players, you're all right, but not game changing. And then the bench is some pundits have been saying that the Tigers are going to be close to the 8, or they're going to be towards the top of the bottom 8. But when you look, it has to be wishful thinking, right? It's if I do that for the Broncos team, I'd go, well, if this player plays like this and this player plays like that, they could come in 9th. That's the same with the Tigers, but it's literally got to be if Dane Laurie plays at an above average starting point, they got a chance. If David Nofaluma continues to be one of the best wingers in the game, okay. If James Roberts rediscovers form from 3 years and 4 teams ago, then sure. If Joey Leilua can keep 20 kilos off, all right. If Luke Brooks can become the future Andrew Johns that he was touted as fucking 8 years ago, then sure. If James Tarmow was 5 years younger, then sure. If Joe Offer, it just goes on and on and on.
If Cody Walker gets injured, if Latrell Mitchell gets injured, South Sydney Rabbitohs don't win the competition. If.
And that's the thing. If Madge's very hard-nosed, tough, gritty training sessions where he pretty much does the Craig Bellamy tactics of breaking them physically and mentally to get them ready for the game, starts working, then it could be the thing where these guys we didn't think much of at the start of the year, we could actually start seeing them as good players. But I just don't see it working because the roster that Madge inherited when he got the Rabbitohs is a fucking much better roster than what he's got now. And I just don't see guys like James Roberts or Joey Leilua or Luciano Leilua or Joe Offer responding well to that type of coaching. If Joe Offer can't play his best footy with guys like Wayne Bennett as his coach, you're fucked.
The building blocks are already falling down. They've actually come out, I don't know who said it. I just heard about it through the NRL 360 and that sort of shit. But apparently the Tigers players have come out and said, Madge is working us too hard. We're training too hard. We need to settle down. No. The problem is that for the last couple of years, you guys fucking coasted along and your performances showed it. And then now this year, he's like, all right, no, we'll actually put in, boys. I need you guys to put in. He's like, oh, no. That. What kind of attitude is that to come out and say to media outlets, like bit of inside gossip at the Tigers, like the coach is pushing us too hard. We're not happy with how hard he's pushing us. Like back in the day, I don't want to go into how things used to be, but like it was go until you fucking can't go anymore.
Like you can never imagine or think of a Gordon Tallis going up to the media and saying like, "Oh, I'm being coached too hard." You know what I mean? Or imagine like Cameron Smith coming out and publicly, and that's the thing, like that's the worst thing that I like. Fair enough, if you're a footy player and you come out and it's like the story says Moses Umbai hits back at his coach and says we are being trained too hard because of this, this, and this. But what I fucking hate is when like whether it's the media kicking it up or it's like players going like, "Oh, like I'll give you this story if I remain anonymous. They're training me too hard." Imagine like, have you ever heard of any of this shit ever happening at the Roosters, at the Storm, at the Raiders, at the Eels, at the fucking any of the top clubs? Like where you have been hearing that in the last few years has the Tigers, Dragons, Broncos. We don't like how Seeves is coaching us. Like if you can't buy in at the most fundamental fucking stage of becoming a good footy team, which is like your coach, like either have a long hard look at yourself or void your contract and get the fuck out. Because while I don't necessarily agree with like Michael Maguire, his approach as a coach, or like he's certainly like as a person, he seems like in at least all of his media interviews, he seems like a little bit standoffish and a little bit like brash and harsh. But like I'm not there every single day, and like I just don't understand how professional footy players, regardless of who the fuck you are, who you think you are, could go out anonymously to the media and say, "Oh, he's training us too hard." How about you say like, "Oh, like I'm not training hard enough"? What? Like that Melbourne Storm team has literally had decades of success almost. At least a decade, almost spanning 2 decades of success with Bellamy. Because he literally breaks them mentally and physically to the point where like when Melbourne Storm players have been tackling on their fucking line for 11 straight fucking tackles, two 6 against, they're like, this isn't even hard because Bellamy's already broken us.
And in this day and age of sports science, where every team has a strength and conditioning coach and conditioning coach, every coach under the sun, right? They know when you're going too hard. Like they
You're actually going to
they know like what your ideal heart rate zone is, like when your body is actually like overexerted, when you should back off. Like they physically like tell you like, yep, you've done your 2 kilometers today, you've achieved this kind of training. If you do any more training, you will burn out. So like there's no way possible, unless the Tigers have literally fired their entire coaching staff, that those players are being pushed so hard that it's defying sports science, and they're overtrained.
And I reckon I know what it is as well, right? You brought it up just before with Joey Leilua, talking about like, oh, like I was the best center, but then I got on the burgers. The thing is, they probably have fucking eating plans for them, nutrition plans, like when to take certain supplements, when to take certain vitamins. And I bet you a lot of the cunts that are saying they're being trained too hard, probably the cunts that aren't sleeping 8 hours a night. They aren't eating all the food they should be eating. They aren't recovering the way they should, not in the ice bath and not in the sauna. And like that's to the point as well. It's like, when your job is, and that's the thing, like they talk about like, a lot of like old NRL players come out and they say, oh, like you got to understand, like you can't say that footy players don't like earn too much money because the guys down the bottom, they actually don't earn like that much money. And the amount of money that they earn over the course of that is very small. And it's like, yeah, but like a lot of these footy players, not all of them, but a lot of them get to this certain point because their whole life, going from under 6s all the way to the fucking 20s, have been patted on the ass, going like, oh, you're so good, you're the best. But like, what actually makes you the best are the people, like the way that Cooper Cronk would prepare for a game, or Cameron Smith, where it isn't like if you want to be a good footy player, like if a player's saying like, here's my sleep schedule, I'm sleeping, what's fucking 7 times 8, 56, so I'm sleeping 56 hours a week, I'm eating all my macros, I'm getting all my calorie intake, like I'm doing all the training session, but here it still shows that I'm tired and I'm fatigued and I need a rest. Sure. But I bet you for the most part, it's just cunts being lazy and then going to the pub afterwards or having a couple of beers, where that's all well and good, but don't bitch about being overtrained, particularly when you're a team whose main talking point or selling point is how many times you finish 9th. The fuck out of here.
There was no credence to that whatsoever, and I couldn't believe it was even a story that obviously emerged from that playing group somewhere. So overall, I think it's just this game is just a test to see if both teams are at where everyone expects them to be at in 2021. So for the Raiders, it's, are you premiership threats? And if so, you should fucking dust these guys pretty easy. And for the Tigers, like, are you still in the rebuild like we all think you are? So for me, Raiders by 20, even.
I'll go 31-12 Raiders.
31, so they kick a field goal to go out by 21.
Kick a field goal before
No.
halftime.
Yeah,
Inside the 40, of course. Actually, no. No, I changed that tip. The Raiders to win 30-12, but with 15 field goals behind 40 metres and 1 field goal in front of 40 metres at the end of the game to ice it.
Fuck, Georgie Williams is going to be busy. All right, the final game of the round, first round of the NRL season. We started off with a bang. The Melbourne Storm versus South Sydney Rabbitohs. How fucking good. And we're ending it with the least exciting game you could possibly imagine. The Cronulla Sharks and the St. George Illawarra Dragons. How do you see it?
No, it's going to be a good game of foot. The back line of the Sharks is, looking really good with, solid names like William Kennedy and Jesse Ram. It's not a good game of footy. Look, we'll get through this one relatively quickly, I guess. Josh Dugan, he's still trotting around the footy field, not because his body's telling him to, I think because his wallet is. You can read between the lines there. Jesse Ramian, he looked good in the All-Stars game. I'll give him that. He looked solid in defence. He's always been, played at the Knights for a little bit. Has never been able to sort of crack down a spot. I am looking forward to him, seeing how he goes, particularly against the Dragons. If there's any game to start the season to try to get a good run of form, it's got to be them, right?
He's good, man. He is actually good, but one centre does not make a team good.
Clear. I like Ronaldo. I think he's pretty good.
Hey, he's from Ipswich. Love him.
Matt Moylan in 6. Look, we'll see. I don't think he's going to make it through 3 or 4 games. It sucks that that's even it's just to that point now where he just can't stay healthy. Chad Townsend is a great foil when he's got good talent around him. Obviously, they're going to miss Sean Johnson while he's still injured, isn't he? Mm-hmm. Yeah, Achilles, of course. Yeah, he's going to be gone for a while. I guess the biggest thing that I found relatively interesting, made even more so after the All-Stars game, is the fact that Andrew Fafita was completely left off the 17. So he's currently in number 20. Mm-hmm. So whether or not that's Johnny Morris making some kind of point or some kind of notice to the playing group, but I don't know. I thought Fafita played well enough in that All-Stars game and looked fit enough to be there, but maybe again we talked about the sport, sport nutrition, sports science. Maybe they've been doing the testing and they just think that maybe now with Intrust New South Wales Cup coming back, that maybe he could stand to play 1 or 2 more rounds there just to get that fitness up to a certain point.
Andrew Fafita's upside is just so much better than what they've brought in, Aiden Tolman or I think Magulius or whatever. So one of those 2 guys has taken Andrew Fafita's spot. Let's say it's Aiden Tolman, because I think Magulius had actually earned his spot and Aiden Tolman's the new recruit. Isn't Andrew Fafita's upside so much better than Aiden Tolman's? Andrew Fafita can do what Aiden Tolman does with one fucking leg. Yeah. And let alone
and that's been the issue, that he's been injured, but it seems like that he's taken control of his weight. And again, he looked fit in that All-Stars game and in a hot Townsville night. I don't know, man. That just seemed that bugged me a little bit because I've always had a bit of a soft spot for Andrew Fafita. I love me a prop that can score a 50-metre meaty.
And then there's just so little changes to what has been some pretty underwhelming teams. That was the only interesting change, the Fafita one for the Sharks. Outside of that, it was just this is more of the same, and you weren't that good last year. And then you got Clune and Hunt getting the nod over Jaden Sullivan. So, like Lumi, I'm also my Rookie of the Year contender's not even in the game yet. But poor bastard, though. I got a feel for Jaden Sullivan, not even in the 21. But young man, bide your time. It's coming. Clune and Hunt are not going to last the season, particularly if the Dragons perform as poorly as we both think that they are.
Well, you can and I think I've heard you is Ben Hunt captain as well? Maybe no, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe I dreamt that. Yeah, it was such a domino effect for the Dragons. They bring Jack Bird in, who was before the Sharkies. He was a Dragons junior. Zach Lomax showed a lot of promise last year. Matthew Duffy again showed a lot of promise, but like losing McInnes, that was one thing. But having him sign to the Sharks was one thing. It's like, fuck, we've got one more year. And then you lose him to an injury for the year. And then you sign Andrew McCulloch to replace him. So you go from having what you think is a really, really good hooker in Cameron McInnes for the next at least 2 to 3 years to you've now got Andrew McCulloch on borrowed time. And by borrowed time, I mean, I reckon every single game before he suits up, he puts an 80-minute timer to see how long it's going to be until one of his ACLs goes out again. Like he played so hard and so many games so young that his body just can't take it anymore. And like if he does get a full season uninjured, then fuck yeah, good for Macca. But it doesn't look likely. And the rest of that team, man, like we spoke about like Tyson Frizzell and like, you know, how we don't think he adds much. But like you take him out, and while though Josh Kerr again looked good in the All-Stars game, like he made the 28 squad for Queensland, he's still an unproven commodity. And then Tarek Sims is just the heights that his career once held for the Cowboys has now gone all the way down to here, where he's a solid, without being spectacular, player. And then to top it all off, you've got Trent fucking Merrin coming off the bench, who I forgot left the NRL, and then I forgot came back.
They just have these like error-prone forwards and injury-prone. Let's do. Stars here, and then like similar to McCulloch, you got Jack Bird as their marquee signing, who is taking his place at centre, but has had very little game time and could be one injury away from just saying, fuck this. So, man, I'm just not excited about this game, but at the same time, it's also the hardest to pick because they're both so average. So I'm going to have to go with the Sharkies. They were at least a top 8 side last year, so with both being pretty much the same as last year, surely they're still better than the Dragons. Sharks by 6.
Yeah, this is a toughie because, and it's even like trying to like look through these rosters and trying to, okay, who do I think are like the top 3 players on the park? And I'd probably go Ben Hunt, Zach Lomax, and Matt Duffy. So I'd say that the top 3 players play for the Dragons. But yeah, I've still got the Sharks winning. I just think, I think Hammond, Ueli, and Aaron Woods are just better than Paul Vaughan and Blake Laurie. Like Wade Graham is like a very, very tidy second rower. Like I've spoken before about like his skills, like his ability as a playmaker and a kicker. Toby Rudolph, is a very, very solid lock forward. And I don't know, man. Like I just trust Aiden Tolman, Jack Williams, and Billy Magoulias more than I do Merrin, Alvaro, and Braden Williami. And yeah, like I reckon I got the Sharkies by 8, I think. But in a 20-12, or like maybe even fucking 10-2 or something like that. Like just a scrappy fucking like not good defense, not good attack. Just every team shit in the bed at the end of the sets.
I was looking at our tips for this week, and we actually did a bit of a split in the first 4 games of the round, which makes it a bit exciting. You know, you've taken one position, I've taken another, and it's anybody's game in the first round, no matter what you think you know. But these last 4 games of the round, it was pretty clear cut, so we were in agreement on that one. But look, that's the end of it for the first round. We probably went into a lot more detail, but it's just like it's so exciting that these are fresh teams that you just don't know what you're going to get from them yet. So by the time we post this episode, it's going to be less than 24 hours, or approximately 24 hours, until the first game of the season, which is the Storm and the Rabbits. What a fucking way to kick off 2021. Let's go. And that's it for today's episode. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and Instagram and leave us your comments, yada, yada, yada. I am going to go and get as much rugby league in as I possibly can this weekend. I've got the Broncos game at Suncorp Stadium on Friday night, and then I jet down to Canberra on Sunday to watch the Raiders with my dad. So getting it all in this weekend. Really looking forward to it. Let's go. Enjoy the footy, guys.